Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Vigilante Deku was Iron Man Part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see Part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story Kyodon from 𝐴𝐿3. So let's start the video. Fireworks lit off in the sky, and the buildings of 𝐼 were covered in bright lights. We are here at the International 𝐼 Technology Expo, the most exciting show of technology in the world, said a newswoman to a camera. Now, after the tech demonstrations, it's time for the awards ceremony. The crowd cheered inside the stadium as the head of the expo, Melissa Shield, took the stage. Hello everybody, Melissa said into the microphone. Thank you all for coming. I hope you've all been enjoying the expo so far. WOOHHH. The crowd cheered. I think that answers my question. Melissa smiled. Then without further ado, let's get the awards ceremony started. WOOHHH. The crowd went wild. Melissa's assistant came and gave her the award. Now, at most award ceremonies, they save the best for last. But we're not going to make you all wait in suspense. Let's start with the big one, Melissa exclaimed. The award for most advanced support technology goes to Midoriya Industries. The crowd cheered, but a little more quietly this time. Now, as per usual, Izuku Midoriya won't be appearing in person, and instead his lovely wife will be receiving the award. Give it up for 𝐴𝐻𝐸 Midoriya, everyone, Melissa said. 𝐴𝐻𝐸 walked up to the stage to roaring applause and a few envious glares in a fancy yet rather simple dress. Thank you, everyone, 𝐴𝐻𝐸 said, taking the award. Me and my husband are happy to receive this wonderful award for the 5th time in a row. And of course, I'll be happy to accept all the other awards we'll be earning tonight. Oh, a bit cocky, aren't we? Melissa playfully teased. Well then again, given past expos, I can't exactly fault you. Yes, but before we go on, 𝐴𝐻𝐸 pulled out a flashcard. Izuku wrote down a speech for once. Some words from the elusive Izuku Midoriya. Make sure to pay attention, everyone, Melissa said. 𝐴𝐻𝐸 cleared her throat. Thank you, everyone. I am honored and overjoyed to be receiving such an important and prestigious award. While I am the one receiving the award, I would like to bring some attention to all the people who helped me get to where I am. To my employees, my investors, and of course my customers. To my mother who supported me through everything. And most of all, to my wife, who's been with me since the beginning, and who without I would be nothing. Oh, went some of the crowd. We as makers of support gear are in charge of helping the heroes who keep us from destruction. We are the ones who help them overcome obstacles that wouldn't be able to otherwise, and we are the ones in charge of boosting to new heights. 𝐴𝐻𝐸 continued. I may be the one winning the award, but we all have an important role to play. Let's continue the good work. The crowd gave a rousing applause. 𝐴𝐻𝐸 bowed and walked off stage. Later, in the hotel room, Izuku Midoriya, CEO and owner of Midoriya Industries, was currently sitting on his hotel bed typing away on his laptop, working on new technology, when suddenly the door slammed open and 𝐴𝐻𝐸 walked in. God, I hate these things, 𝐴𝐻𝐸 said, referring to her overly expensive and very uncomfortable heels. She quickly unstrapped her feet from the height-extending torture devices, before throwing them to the other side of the room. I said you shouldn't have bought those. I told you your feet would hurt. Izuku closed his laptop and directed all his attention to her. You could have just gotten something more comfortable. Yeah, but comfortable and good-looking don't go together. 𝐴𝐻𝐸 sighed as she kept getting undressed. And if I don't look my best, then we'll get 50 online posts about how I might secretly be a 𝐴𝐻𝐸. And besides, these shoes were a steal. They look way more expensive than they actually are. You always look your best, Izuku grumbled. And anyone who calls you a 𝐴𝐻𝐸 isn't worth listening to. 𝐴𝐻𝐸 gave a kind smile at her husband, walking up to him and cupping his face in her hands. I know, but not everyone can see things like you do. And I have to make sure the public opinion is high. Then, 𝐴𝐻𝐸's expression changed from loving and tender to upset and disappointed. Speaking of opinions, the card. Yeah, you changed it, Izuku pointed out. Of course I changed it, 𝐴𝐻𝐸 yelled, taking her hands off Izuku and pulling out the card. I'm not if really deserve this. I wouldn't be able to do anything without help. Izuku, what have I said about self-deprecation? I wasn't doing that. I was just being humble, Izuku argued, waving his hand defensively. Okay, first of all, there is a time and place for humbleness. If you're too humble or are doing it at the wrong time, then it actually makes you sound arrogant. And 2, no you weren't, 𝐴𝐻𝐸 scolded him. She walked over to the door, before opening it and yelling down the hall. 𝐀𝐦, bring me one of the awards. Izuku gave her a confused look. What are you, their bodyguard? 𝐀𝐦 Akaguro showed up quickly with one of the awards they had gotten. Here you are. Thank you. You're dismissed, 𝐴𝐻𝐸 said, letting 𝐀𝐦 bow and take his leave before closing the door. Then she grabbed Izuku, dragged him in front of a mirror, and stuck the trophy in his hand. "Look at that," 𝐻𝐡𝐭 said. "You did this. You earned this." "Yeah, but I couldn't have done this without," 𝐻𝐡𝐭 cut him off. "And without you, this could never have been done," 𝐻𝐡𝐭 said. "Repeat after me. I deserve this. I deserve this," Izuku said hesitantly. "Louder," 𝐻𝐡𝐭 chanted. "More confidence. Don't look at me, look at the mirror." "I deserve this," Izuku said, slightly more confidently, like he was trying to convince himself. "Louder. Believe in yourself," 𝐻𝐡𝐭 encouraged. "I deserve this," Izuku yelled at the mirror. Again, 𝐻𝐡𝐭 shouted. "I deserve this," Izuku repeated. "One more time," 𝐻𝐡𝐭 said. "We deserve this," Izuku shouted, a smile forming on his face. "That's right, hey," 𝐻𝐡𝐭 said. "That's cheating. Maybe, but I feel better about taking credit for things if you're taking credit with me." Izuku laughed. 𝐻𝐡𝐭 started laughing with him. "Fine, fine. If it helps." 𝐻𝐡𝐭 moved Izuku's arms up, moved in front of him, and then lowered his arms around her, then put her hands on Izuku's. "There, feel better?" she asked, smiling brightly at him. "Much." Izuku smiled back at her. The two of them laughed for a little while before returning to their conversation. "I'm sorry for making you go out there by yourself," Izuku apologized. Izuku, I love you, but you need to stop apologizing. Trust me, I'll tell you if you've done anything you need to apologize about," 𝐻𝐡𝐭 said. "Understood. Understood." Izuku smiled. "Good. And, if you want to make it up to me," 𝐻𝐡𝐭 slid out of his arms. "You'll go to the investor tech demonstration." Izuku's smile fell, and he started to look away from 𝐻𝐡𝐭. 𝐻𝐡𝐭, Izuku put down the award as he began thinking over the request. "Izuku, look at me," 𝐻𝐡𝐭 said, making sure his attention was on her. "You haven't gone outside in years. You need to show your face to the public again, or at least just our investors for now." Izuku looked at her, his eyes conveying his inner confliction, before eventually sighing and giving in. "I'll do it. For you. Thank you." 𝐻𝐡𝐭 leaned in and brought her lips to his. The kiss didn't last long, but it served its purpose of comforting Izuku, putting him at ease about his decision. Their lips parted, and Izuku looked down at his smiling wife. "Don't worry, I'll be with you. Always," 𝐻𝐡𝐭 whispered. Izuku smiled back at her. "I know." For that night, Izuku put his troubles aside and let himself be at ease. A few weeks later, Izuku breathed deeply as the limousine brought him to his destination. On his right was 𝐻𝐡𝐭, and on his left was 𝐀𝐦, doing his job as his bodyguard and making sure he was safe. Right now, they were heading towards a special compound that they used to test out their technology and going to show off their 𝐓𝐡𝐢 gauntlets, energy focusing enhancement gauntlets. Truth is, Izuku was a shut-in. Once his company had gained enough money, power, and acclaim, he simply disappeared from the public eye altogether. The only time the public ever heard of him afterward is when he was being credited for things. 𝐻𝐡𝐭 had helped him with being in public back in the days when the company was first starting out. And after they had gotten married, she had been encouraging him to go outside more and get back into the public light. These attempts have been mostly fruitless, but today was her first success. The limo stopped. "Looks like we're here," 𝐀𝐦 said, opening the door and looking around, before getting out of the way so Izuku could leave. Izuku got out of the car, blinking rapidly as his eyes tried to adjust to the sun. The three of them, as well as a few guards, walked into the facility. "So, what kind of people are the investors?" Izuku asked. "They're investors. They want money," 𝐀𝐦 said. "Show them something that can make them money, and you're on their good side, which shouldn't be hard. The 𝐓𝐡𝐢 gauntlets are some of our most impressive products yet. Pretty much anyone with a quirk that shoots out any sort of energy is gonna want it," 𝐻𝐡𝐭 said. "𝐬𝐴 Endeavor Chargeable Ground Zero," Izuku suggested. "No," 𝐻𝐡𝐭 and 𝐀𝐦 said in unison. "He is permanently banned from receiving any of our gear." 𝐻𝐡𝐭 grit her teeth. Now, is that because he bullied Izuku when they were kids, or is it because he is almost single-handedly responsible for your hero career not taking off? 𝐀𝐦 asked. "Yes," 𝐻𝐡𝐭 shouted. 𝐻𝐡𝐭 had tried to be a hero in order to provide for her family. However, after failing the entrance exam and being put in general education, her only chance to get in would have been to impress you at the sports festival. However, luck was never on her side, as for the first two sports festivals, she got put up against Bakugo in the first round. And in the third sports festival, her first round was against Shoto Todoroki. So as you can imagine, she already didn't like Bakugo that much. And when she found out what he did and said to Izuku, she hated him even more. "God, I hate that prick," 𝐻𝐡𝐭 exclaimed. "How has Stain not tried to cut his head off yet?" 𝐻𝐡𝐭. Izuku gave her a serious look. I'm sorry. That was wrong," 𝐻𝐡𝐭 said, looking ashamed. I really hate that guy." Izuku sighed. Bakugo had always been a bit of a sticking point for the two of them. Izuku had always tried to point out the positives of Bakugo, something that got easier as he matured into a more rational and less aggressive person. Ochako would then often point out the many not-so-positive qualities, like his short temper, violent tendencies, past history of bullying, foul mouth, a large amount of property damage he caused back in his early days, etc. When the company got big, Ochako had desperately wanted to expose Bakugo's past to the public and bring his hero career down. Izuku managed to talk her out of this, and the two came to a compromise. They would keep quiet about Bakugo's bullying, but he would be banned from obtaining any of their support items. Ever since then they didn't mention him much. The only time Izuku would ever bring him up is when he tried to convince Ochako to unban Bakugo. This was always met with stonewall rejection. After a bit more walking they finally reached the test chamber. The test chamber was a small viewing box that looked down at a large white room. The only thing separating the rooms was thick glass. Inside the viewing box was a bunch of old-looking men in suits. The investors. "Ah, Mr. Midoriya," one of the investors said. "It's a pleasure to see you." "A pleasure and a surprise," said another investor. "This one is not sounding as happy. After so long I had thought you would never have come out of your hole." "I apologize for that." Izuku bowed. "Enough," Ochako said to the investors. "You came here to talk about technology. You know, the thing that's making you money. Not my husband's usual lack of presence." "I agree," said an impatient investor. "I would rather get this over with quickly." "Good. Now if everyone could direct your attention to the test chamber," Ochako said. Inside the test chamber was a man who was wearing the 𝐹𝐸 gauntlet and 3 targets. "Everyone, this man has a quirk called air bullets. He can condense air into pellets and shoot them out of his hand," Ochako explained. "This quirk has 2 major issues, however." Ochako then lifted up her hand and spoke into her watch. "Sir, please demonstrate your quirk without the gauntlet." The man lifted the arm without the gauntlet and aimed at the targets. He shot out a bunch of weak air pellets for his hand, most of which went flying all over the place, and the few that hit the targets didn't do much, as pellets are difficult to aim and are rather weak, Ochako explained. "However, with the gauntlet." "Sir, please demonstrate your quirk while using the gauntlet." The man raised his other arm and used his quirk again. This time, rather than a bunch of weak, scattered pellets coming out, instead a single, focused air bullet flew out at the target and destroyed it immediately. The investors looked impressed. "Izuku, if you wouldn't mind explaining the gauntlet." Ochako put the focus on him. Well, the gauntlet focuses energy projectiles and condenses it before focusing it outward. This causes any energy projectiles that are fired from the gauntlet to become stronger, faster, and more focused, Izuku explained nervously. "Mind you, there are some drawbacks. For one, this only works for energy-based projectiles, and it also doesn't allow for wide attacks. However, the gauntlet can be deactivated, allowing heroes to use their wide attacks again." Very impressive. "I can imagine this will sell quite well," said one of the investors. "Agreed," said another investor. Suddenly, everything started to shake. "What was that?" asked one of the investors. BRRR. Intruder alert. Intruder alert. Intruders. Shizome went on edge. "All right, everyone get out. We need to," and the roof collapsed, and everything went dark. Sometime later, Izuku groaned as he slowly regained consciousness. He opened his eyes and saw that he was in an unfamiliar room. It was rather plain and dull, as well as being extremely clean. Where am I?" Izuku asked no one in particular. He tried to move but found that he wasn't able to. He turned his head and saw he was tied down to a chair. Izuku's eyes widened as alarm bells rang in his head. Before he could act on the panic that was rising within him, the door in front of him opened, and in came what he assumed were his kidnappers. A man with black hair, a large coat, white gloves, and a bird mask, another man with a similar mask as well as a white hood that completely covered his face, and a strange black bird doll. "Hello, Midoriya Izuku," said the man in the coat. "Welcome to the 𝐲𝐿 𝐍𝐴. "Hello, Midoriya Izuku," said the man in the coat. "Welcome to the 𝐲𝐿 𝐍𝐴. Izuku's eyes widened. He recognized that name, and what it meant. "The Yakuza." Izuku gasped. "You're the Yakuza. You know it," said the doll. "Allow us to introduce ourselves. I am 𝗏𝗏, the leader," the man in the coat said. "The one in the white is 𝐀𝐦, and the small one is 𝐵𝗃. What do you want with me?" Izuku asked, breathing rapidly as fear filled his veins. "Your brain," 𝗏𝗏 said. "More specifically, your knowledge." "My knowledge," Izuku repeated. That was not the answer he expected. At best he thought that he was being held ransom, and at worst he thought he was going to be assassinated. "It would be easier to show you," 𝗏𝗏 said. "Chrono, untie him." 𝐀𝐦 nodded and walked behind Izuku and started untying the restraints. "Don't do anything stupid," 𝐀𝐦 said as he finished freeing him. Izuku got the message and stayed as still as possible, showing no resistance whatsoever. "Follow us," 𝗏𝗏 commanded as he started walking out of the room. 𝐀𝐦 nudged him. making Izuku stumble forward and start following 𝗏𝗏. The Yakuza base was cramped and dreary, with Yakuza members trudging through the long, gray, narrow hallways, avoiding eye contact with all of them. Izuku nervously walked with the 3 villains, wondering what exactly they could want with him. Maybe they have someone with an intelligence-stealing quirk. Maybe they want my support gear designs. Or maybe Izuku went from thinking to muttering without noticing. "Shut up," Mimic shouted. "Quit your yapping. We're already here." Izuku looked up and saw a door with 2 Yakuza guarding the door. The guards stepped aside as 𝗏𝗏 walked towards them, before opening the door and revealing what's inside. It was a lab, a quite up-to-date one in fact, filled with all the chemicals and equipment that he would put in one of his company's labs. It was also very, very clean. Like not a speck of dirt had inhabited this lab since it was created. The only thing that seemed out of place was the mattress in the corner. Only one person was inside the lab. Was another man in a bird mask. This one looked like a plague doctor. "This will be where you'll be staying," 𝗏𝗏 said. "You see, the Yakuza has had problems re-establishing itself in today's society. You're going to help us in our rise to power." Chronostasis took out one of Midoriya's support items, the bracer boots. Izuku's eyes widened. "How did you get that?" "We bought it. An entire shipment of it," 𝗏𝗏 explained. "After all, we are one of your company's distributors after all." "What?" Izuku was horrified by what he was hearing. "That's impossible. Neither me or Ochako have ever agreed to dealing with the Yakuza." "Yes, but you and your lovely wife aren't keeping track of every crate of gear you create. And some members of your company know that and decided to make a little extra money," 𝗏𝗏 said. "They ship out your gear to black market distributors and let them sell it directly to the villains." Izuku's mouth was hanging open in shock. "My tech is in the hands of villains." He had spent most of his life trying to make the gear to help the heroes that help people. Years of him researching and testing, all the sake of others. And now he was being told his tech was in the hands of those who would use it to hurt others. No, I can't let this happen. I have to do something." Then Izuku remembered where he was. "Damn it, but I can't do it from here. I'll have to wait for the heroes to rescue me." Something about that thought pained Izuku. The feeling of being saved, of being helpless. It brought him back to when he was in middle school, being tossed around and laughed at. He remembered being Deku. "Hey, are you paying attention?" Mimic shouted, bringing Izuku out of his thoughts. Sorry," Izuku stuttered. "As I was saying," 𝗏𝗏 gave Izuku an annoyed glare that made his skin crawl. "We've decided to skip the middleman and get the technology straight from the source itself. From now on you'll be making gear for us to sell," Chronostasis said, "as well as personal gear for us exclusively." Izuku grit his teeth. "Damn it, I don't know how long the heroes are going to take, so I might actually have to make something for these guys. Maybe I can stall long enough to that, however, will not be your main priority," 𝗏𝗏 said. "No, we have something much more important for you to work on." 𝗏𝗏 took a small object out of his pocket and brought it up to Izuku's face. The CEO's face widened as he immediately recognized what it was. "A quirk erasing bullet," Izuku whispered. These were infamous amongst hero society, with several heroes having gotten shot by these things and temporarily losing their quirks. For the most part they were a rare annoyance, as the heroes would always regain their quirks sometime after. However, a couple of heroes had lost their lives because of these bullets. Izuku had been given some samples of the bullets to see if he could track the technology or find out more about it. While Izuku didn't find out much more than they already knew about the bullets, other than one disturbing fact. The base chemical of the bullet was not a chemical at all, but human blood. Are the Yakuza the ones producing these?" Izuku asked. No one had been able to track down the ones producing the bullets. The distribution system was too complex, and the thugs they captured were too terrified to talk. "That's right," 𝗏𝗏 said. "These are what is going to bring the Yakuza back to its former glory. Up until now we've been unable to make the effects permanent. And so that's what you want me to do?" Izuku interrupted him. "You want me to make the bullet's effect permanent, and we want you to make a cure for the bullet as well," 𝗏𝗏 said, deciding to ignore the fact that he was interrupted. "We'll sell the bullets to the villains, and the cure to the heroes. Our power and influence will grow, and the Yakuza will return to their rightful place as the rulers of Japan." Izuku looked at the bullet. What Izuku could do what 𝗏𝗏 wanted him to do. Then the Yakuza would in fact become the most influential crime lords in the country, beating even the League of Villains in their prime. And that was something he could not allow. "If I say no, they'll kill me," Izuku said in his head, weighing his options. "Or worse, and if I don't make any progress after a long period of time, then they'll realize I won't cooperate, and then they'll kill me. My only option is to stall long enough for the heroes to come and rescue me." "Well, I don't have any other option," Izuku said through clenched teeth. "Do you really intend to do this?" asked the plague doctor-looking man. "Yes." Izuku felt the answer force its way out of his mouth. "What was that? Do you have any intention of trying to escape?" the man asked. "No." Again the answer was forced from him. Is that your quirk? That's none of your business. Mimic said. From now on, your life extends to the inside of this lab. You'll start immediately. 𝗏𝗏 said. Bring her in. Her? 𝐬𝐻𝐸 questioned. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 heard footsteps from behind 𝗏𝗏. He moved his head to see who was approaching, and his heart stopped. Standing there, escorted by one of the Yakuza goons, was a little girl. Immediately a million thoughts ran through his mind. Why is there a little girl here? Is she a hostage? One of the Yakuza's kids? A kidnapped victim? Wait, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 thought. What does this have to do with the bullets? Oh no, this is 𝐬𝐻𝐸, 𝗏𝗏 said. Her blood is the main component of the bullet. Cold dread ran through 𝐬𝐻𝐸's veins. His worst fear was confirmed. He took another look at the little girl, and she flinched just from his glance. She was obviously terrified. He looked back at 𝗏𝗏 with a look of shock and disgust. You want me to take the blood out of a little girl? Yes. Is there a problem with that? 𝗏𝗏 leaned over him intimidatingly, but to the surprise of everyone, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 didn't shrink back in terror, instead keeping his disgusted gaze on the crime lord. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 had no idea where this courage came from. He certainly felt absolutely terrified, but somehow it seemed like 𝐬𝐻𝐸's presence had given him strength he didn't know he had. 𝗏𝗏 was tempted to give 𝐬𝐻𝐸 a show of force, but decided on something else. Either you take her blood, or I will, 𝗏𝗏 threatened. That made 𝐬𝐻𝐸 step back. He looked over at 𝐬𝐻𝐸, who was starting to tremble in fear. His options were limited, but he needed to do something about this. Needed to take control of the situation, at least a little. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 glared at 𝗏𝗏. I have some demands. 𝗏𝗏 raised his eyebrow. You're not in a position to make demands. Except I am. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 pulled together all the courage he had. You have plans. Big plans. Plans that I am essential to. If I don't work for you, then your dream of re-establishing the Yakuza dies here. Sure, you could torture me, but all the time you spend doing that is time I could be working. And you don't seem like the type to waste time. Know your place, you little. Mimic started walking towards him angrily, before 𝗏𝗏 gave him a look, signaling to stop. Listening to my demands will be easier for everyone in the end. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 finished. 𝗏𝗏 glared at him for a while, as if waiting for 𝐬𝐻𝐸 to wither under his glare. We will listen, 𝗏𝗏 conceded. First, I want her here, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 said. In this room, under my supervision. I don't want your thugs touching her. 𝗏𝗏's glare never faltered. You don't want that. You don't know what kind of monster that girl is. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 held her head down with shame, as 𝗏𝗏 degraded her once more. If her quirk goes off, and you touch her, 𝗏𝗏 took off one of his gloves and touched one of the beakers, destroying it immediately. Just like her father. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 looked past 𝗏𝗏 and right at 𝐬𝐻𝐸, giving the poor girl a pitying look, before turning back to 𝗏𝗏 and continuing to glare. As far as I'm concerned, me and her are the only people in this room who aren't monsters, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 said. The tension in the room was palpable, but 𝐬𝐻𝐸 refused to lose his nerve now. He couldn't do much for this girl, but he could at least try and get her away from them. Fine, I'll leave you a tranq gun in case her quirk goes out of control, 𝗏𝗏 said. Anything else? I don't want anyone touching anything in my lab, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 said. No one touches the vials, the chemicals, the tech, 𝐬𝐻𝐸, nothing. Fine, 𝗏𝗏 said. He didn't want his goons touching things in here anyway. They would probably kill themselves or something. Is that all? 𝐬𝐻𝐸 thought for a moment. He'd already pushed his luck enough. This was probably the best he was going to get for now. That's it, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 said. Good, now get to work. 𝗏𝗏 turned to his men. Bring 𝐬𝐻𝐸's things. Boss, are you really gonna give in to this chump? Mimic shouted. We're just changing which room 𝐬𝐻𝐸's in. At the end of the day, nothing has changed, 𝗏𝗏 said. With those last words, 𝗏𝗏 and his followers walked out of the room, closing the door behind him and leaving him alone with 𝐬𝐻𝐸. The two of them looked at each other for a while, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 giving him a curious, yet fearful expression, and 𝐬𝐻𝐸 giving her a sad, apologetic expression. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 breathed in deep. Hello, I'm 𝐬𝐻𝐸 Midoriya. Nice to meet you. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 didn't respond. I'm not here to hurt you, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 said. Why you want to take my blood? 𝐬𝐻𝐸 pointed out. No, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 said. I don't want to. They're making me. If I had a choice, then I would never even consider doing this to you. This seemed to make 𝐬𝐸 ease up slightly. Very slightly. Are you going to take me apart? 𝐬𝐸 asked him. 𝐬𝐻𝐸's expression shifted to confusion. Take you apart? Like the glass, 𝐬𝐸 said, pointing to the beaker. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 was very befuddled. Didn't 𝗏𝗏 destroy that with his quirk? How is it still here? Unless, maybe his quirk lets him take things apart on a molecular level and then put them back together. Is 𝗬𝐸 saying he's been doing that to her? But that would mean in the brief time she was destroyed she would be. The mere thought of what 𝗬𝗸 was implying made 𝐬𝐻𝐸 want to vomit. 𝗬𝗎 has known 𝗏𝗏 for less than 3 hours, and he has already rocketed to the top of the rather short list of people he hates. No, 𝗬𝗎 said firmly. No, I won't do that. I will never do that. So long as I'm here, you'll never have to go through that again. 𝗬𝗎's eyes widened, shining with hope for a moment. Then, as if she was afraid to feel hopeful, she sunk back into the feeling of terror. I know you don't want to do this. Neither do I, Izuku said. But if I don't take your blood, then they might hurt you again. So please, just go along with me. After a few moments, Eri gave a hesitant nod. Izuku breathed in deep. As he walked Eri to the chair and then pulled out the equipment, he wondered if he was really going to do this. If he was going to do something so wrong. As Izuku administered the anesthesia, Eri started getting confused and panicked. Why am I sleepy? Eri asked as she desperately tried to stay awake, scared of what would happen if she let herself drift off. It's okay. It's okay. Izuku calmed her. I'm just putting you to sleep so you're not in pain during the process. I promise, I'm not going to hurt you. Eri looked into Izuku's eyes. She didn't see the usual annoyance that she saw in the Yakuza goons, or the indifference from the 8 precepts, or the disgust from Overhaul. Instead, she saw sadness, protectiveness, and honesty. It seemed like this man truly did not want to hurt her. That unlike everyone else, his words and promises were not empty. Eri closed her eyes, placing her hope and trust in Izuku for the moment, before falling into a deep sleep. Sometime later, Eri groggily opened her eyes. She felt weak, weaker than usual, and dizzy. Her head hurt too. These feelings were familiar to her, as this is what she typically felt like after getting her blood drained. She quickly looked around and was surprised to see she wasn't on the chair, but rather in her bed. Whenever she had passed out during the blood drawing before, Overhaul would typically wake her up immediately and then force her to walk back after he was done. She was still in the same room. It just looked like her bed had been moved here along with some of her things, and she could see Izuku working on something close by. This was confusing. Was the blood draining done already? She felt like she did after her blood was drained, but where was the pain? The needles, the pumps. She looked at Izuku, wondering if he truly didn't want to hurt her. If she could trust him. She felt like she could, but at the same time, she was scared. What if she was wrong? What if he was tricking her? Overhaul would sometimes try to have some of his goons get along with her, try and befriend her. But Izuku seemed different. Not only did he seem very real and genuine, unlike those Yakuza goons, but he also didn't seem to like Overhaul. Eri's head hurt from thinking too much. Eri didn't want to bring attention to herself, so she just silently watched Izuku work for a little while. Before her stomach growled. Izuku turned his head to look at Eri, finally noticing that she was awake and sitting up. Eri. He quickly walked over to her, dragging a table with wheels on it with him. You shouldn't be sitting up so quickly. I am sorry, Eri said fearfully. Eri was going to lie back down, but before she could, Izuku went over to her and moved her pillow up. Izuku placed his hand on her chest and moved her towards the pillow, letting her lay back against it. Izuku's hands. They felt so kind. They weren't cold and forceful like Overhaul and his goons. He didn't push her as they would have. Rather, his hands were warm and gentle, trying to guide Eri towards the pillow. How do you feel? Izuku asked her. I'm okay, Eri lied. She had to lie. Overhaul hated when she complained. He would punish her if she said that she felt sick or was in pain. He said it's what a monster like her deserved. Eri, you just lost a lot of blood, Izuku said sternly. You are definitely not okay. I need to make sure nothing went wrong, and if something did go wrong, I have to find out what it is so I can make it better. So please tell me the truth. Eri sunk back into the pillow. My head hurts, and I feel dizzy and weak and hungry. Izuku nodded. Okay, that's normal. You should be fine after a while. But first let's take care of that hunger. Izuku moved the table towards her. On top of it was a plate of beans. They were cheap and kinda gross looking, but Eri was used to it by now. Eri gave him a hesitant look, and Izuku nodded, conveying to her it was okay to eat it. Her hand shakily moved towards the spoon. As she picked it up, her hand shook a lot. Izuku frowned as he saw Eri struggle. He grabbed the spoon from Eri's hand, and a jolt of fear ran through her. Had she done something wrong? Was she not going to be allowed to eat anymore? Izuku gathered the mushy beans in the spoon before holding it up to Eri's face. Open wide. Eri blinked, confused by the action, but decided to go along with it. She opened her mouth, and Izuku fed the beans to her. For the next few minutes, Izuku silently fed her. This situation felt familiar to her. If she thought hard enough and pushed past the headaches, she could barely remember someone doing this to her before. She thinks it's her father. She can't even really remember him at this point. Without even realizing it, tears start dripping from Eri's eyes. This alarmed Izuku, who immediately stopped what he was doing. Is something wrong? Are you okay? Why are you being so kind to me? Eri asked him. I'm a monster. I'm cursed. Eri continued crying. She was promptly silenced when Izuku's arms wrapped around her, embracing her in a firm yet gentle embrace. You're not a monster, Izuku told her. The people who told you that you were, the people who hurt you, those are the real monsters. But my curse, Eri cried. Your quirk, Izuku corrected. No one can control what quirk they get, and no one is at fault for not knowing how to use it. These kind words, this gentle embrace, it was more affection than Eri had ever remembered receiving in her life. For almost as long she could remember, she was surrounded by people who hated her and called her a monster. People who hurt her and told her it was her fault for existing. But Izuku wasn't like that. In the short time she had known him, he had shown her care, compassion, affection. He didn't think she was a monster. She wrapped her arms around his waist and cried in his torso. Izuku gently pets the back of her head, letting her unload her pain onto him. At that moment, Izuku made a promise to himself that no matter what happened, he would protect this girl, even if it cost him his life. 𝗏𝗏 strutted into the lab with Shin by his side, and was displeased to find that Izuku was in the process of feeding Eri. If I wanted a babysitter, I wouldn't have gone through the trouble of kidnapping one of the world's greatest scientists, 𝗏𝗏 said in a very annoyed tone. Eri immediately clung to Izuku, and the CEO turned his head to meet the villains. It's been a month, 𝗏𝗏 walking up to Izuku in an imposing fashion, and you've yet to produce any results. Progress takes time, Izuku said. As the people who produce this bullet, you should understand this. I may be smart, but I'm not magic. I can't produce groundbreaking progress in only a month. And since I've been focusing on this, I haven't had much time to work on support gear. 𝗏𝗏 turned to Shin and nodded, signaling him to use his quirk. Are you stalling? Shin asked. Not really, Izuku responded. I already know how to improve the bullet, but you guys haven't given me the means to do it. 𝗏𝗏 glared at him. How? We've given you all the chemicals and components you could possibly need, and we send someone in here to ask if you need supplies once a week. But supplies I ask for never come, Izuku pointed out. That's because the supplies you ask for are things like orange juice, vitamins, and things that have nothing to do with your task. 𝗏𝗏 glared at him. But they do have to do with my task, Izuku corrected him. Have you heard of the hero grape juice? Who hasn't? 𝗏𝗏 said. Everyone knew about grape juice. He became famous after his heroic death, taking the infamous Gigantomachia with him to the grave. Are you aware of how his health affected his quirk? Izuku asked. The healthier he was, the more effective his quirk. This can also be said about many other people's quirks. For Eri, however, this is only somewhat the case. While Eri's quirk, in itself, is not affected by her health, her quirk-affected blood is. Due to the poor condition Eri is in both physically and mentally, the blood we're getting from her is of poor quality. The food you give her is cheap and bland, and you don't even give us enough of it. She hasn't seen the sun in years. She's been constantly getting her blood drained from her, and she's stuck in a facility with people who hate her and has been getting physically and mentally tormented for years. 𝗏𝗏 looked at him for a moment. So what you're saying is if Eri's in better health, the bullet's effects will last longer? Yes, Izuku responded. 𝗏𝗏 turned to Shin. Are you speaking the truth? Shin asked. Yes, Izuku said. ⁴ Fine, tell me what you need then. 𝗏𝗏 said. Since I know you won't let her outside, I'll need a lot of orange juice to make up for all the vitamin D she's missing. Izuku started spouting out necessities. I'll also need vitamins to make up for all the other nutrients she is missing. Also, I'll need more healthy foods. Not that cheap stuff you feed us either, but some actually tolerable food. I'll also need some books to stimulate her mentally. She can't read. 𝗏𝗏 interrupted her. I'll teach her, Izuku responded. We'll also need way more food than you're giving us. Part of the reason my work has been slow is because I've barely been eating. We've been giving you enough food, so why is it you're the one hungry? 𝗏𝗏 asked. You give me the bare minimum, and you give her even less. So when I give her my food, there's not enough food for me left over. Izuku explained. You know what? It would be better if you just supplied us with food every month and we'll ration it out from there. There's no refrigerator or stove down here, 𝗏𝗏 pointed out. I'll make one, Izuku said. I'll also need you and your men to visit as little as possible. A person's health state can affect their physical health, and as you can see, her mental health is not exactly the greatest, in no small part because of you. So the best way for her to recover would be as little exposure to you and your men as possible. Fine, I didn't intend to storm into here every month anyway. I'll be sending an inspector every month to make sure you're not up to anything, and someone to give you food and supplies every month. 𝗏𝗏 said. Is that all? Izuku asked. Yes, now get back to work, 𝗏𝗏 said as he and Shin walked out of the room. Izuku breathed a sigh of relief. It looks like it worked. Ever since Izuku was a child, he'd always analyze quirks, writing down details and theories in his notebook. At first, he intended to use these notes to help him become a hero, but when that dream was dashed, he repurposed them to help him in his support gear construction. He'd been analyzing quirks for years, which meant he knew exactly how many different types of quirks work, even if he's never seen them before. Shin's quirk was in the rare category of what Izuku called truth quirks, quirks that forced someone to tell the truth or prevented them from lying. And while it was rare, it was not entirely unique. He's seen quirks like it before and as such has figured out how it functions. For example, How does a truth quirk define and figure out what the truth is? It's not like the quirk fact checks with some omnipresent being, so it's not like the quirk itself knows the truth. The answer, it reads the victim's mind. It checks the person's mind for what they think the truth is. The keyword being, what they think is the truth. What someone thinks the truth is, and the truth itself is, can be completely different. And a truth quirk would never know. To simplify, if an innocent person mistakenly thought that they had killed someone, then the truth quirk would make it look like they really did kill someone. A truth quirk simply prevents someone from lying. It does not reveal the truth. And what someone thinks is the truth can be manipulated. Some people with mental quirks, or just significant mental training, someone could trick themselves into thinking a false truth. And while 𝐬𝐻𝐸 didn't have nearly the mental fortitude or training to pull something like that off, he could do something much simpler. Wordplay. You see, words were a funny thing in that they don't have any inherent meaning or purpose. If humans decided tomorrow that red should be called blue and vice versa, then that would be the case. And as such, many words could carry multiple meanings and could be interpreted in different ways as well. That's why when 𝐬𝐻𝐸 said that he wasn't stalling, he wasn't technically lying. If in his head 𝐬𝐻𝐸 defined stalling as deliberately not doing his work in favor of doing nothing. Instead, he was prioritizing other things and allowing things to impede his progress. While most people would define that as stalling, if 𝐬𝐻𝐸 could convince himself that it wasn't, then he could basically lie to 𝐲 despite his quirk. This method was only so effective, however. If 𝐲 started asking him specific questions or asked for details, then he could probably figure out that something was up. Which is why 𝐬𝐻𝐸 had to make sure his answers were formulated in a non-suspicious way and that he had reasonable excuses for his actions. The part of 𝐲's quirk that was unique was the fact that his quirk forced you to tell the truth. Normally, truth quirks just let people spot lies or keep people from lying, but 𝐲's quirk forced you to say whatever secrets you're hiding. It's an extremely powerful quirk that was hard to counter. After theorizing about how this quirk worked, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 came to the conclusion that this worked like an internet search. The quirk searches your brain for an answer to whatever question 𝐲 asked, and then forces you to say it out loud. The best way to counter this was to think of what 𝐲 is going to ask you beforehand. Come up with an answer that wasn't a lie, answered 𝐲's question, but also didn't give away too much. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 sighed. Dealing with 𝐲's quirk would be a massive obstacle in his endeavors. His only saving grace is that apparently he wasn't around all that often. His quirk was so useful that Overhaul always had him doing work outside the base. Growl. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 grimaced. He hadn't been exaggerating when he said he wasn't eating much. Almost all of the food was going to 𝐬𝐻𝐸, with 𝐬𝐻𝐸 only ever eating a few spoonfuls at most. He shook his head. He couldn't think about it. If he thought about how hungry he was, then that would just make it worse. He needed to get back to feeding 𝐬𝐻𝐸, who was looking at him with concerned eyes. I'm fine, 𝐬𝐻𝐸. Let's go back to eating. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 tried to comfort her, forcing a smile on his face. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 sat down and was about to pick the spoon when 𝐬𝐻𝐸 snatched it up instead. She determinedly scooped up some of the food and held it up to 𝐬𝐻𝐸. Eat. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 was taken aback. In the month he and 𝐬𝐻𝐸 had been here, she was always either meekly clinging to him or watching him work from her bed. Whenever she got concerned about him, she would usually just look at him with sad eyes. So it was a bit surprising to see her do something like this. After getting over his slight shock, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 smiled, this time more genuinely. I'll be fine, 𝐬𝐻𝐸. I'm an adult, I'll live. You're still young, and you keep having your blood drained from you. You need to eat a lot. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 shook her head definitely. I am full. Please eat. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 wiped a tear from his eye. He had never seen her so determined before. He was so touched that she cared about him so much, although it probably shouldn't have been surprising. After 𝐬𝐻𝐸 got close to her, he learned that she was starving for affection. Every time he so much as patted her on the head or gave a simple work of praise, she would look like you just told her they were going to an amusement park. She would always do her best to help him, sometimes handing him tools or vials, trying her best to earn his praise and affection. It was cute, but also horribly sad. It made 𝐬𝐻𝐸 wonder about 𝐬𝐻𝐸's origins. He'd figured out that her quirk awakening had accidentally caused her father's death. But what about her mother? 𝐬𝐻𝐸 had asked her about it, but whenever he did, she would get really upset, so he didn't push it. Growl. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 held his stomach. I guess a few bites won't hurt. A little over a month later, after all the supplies came in, life in the lab became much less miserable. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 had gotten slightly more energetic now that she had some more nutrients and wasn't getting the blood drained from her as often. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 was no longer left wanting for food, now that they were being supplied with an abundant amount of food every month, to be stored in their fridge and cooked with their stove. Now of all times, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 was glad that 𝐴CHACO insisted they both do the cooking themselves, rather than getting professional chefs to do it all the time. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 hadn't shown much of his progress on the bullet, stating that he needed to wait until 𝐬𝐸 was fully healthy before continuing with the blood experiments. Overall, things have been going relatively well, all things considered. However, as 𝐬𝐻𝐸 waited for the heroes to arrive, he felt this itch, not a physical one of course, but more like a mental one. It felt like he was doing something wrong. and it frustrated him more and more the longer he waited. But what else could he do? Izuku asked himself that question in his head as he put together a protective chest armor. He did have to produce some results, otherwise they might just kill him, so he was making some support gear. "Eri, could you pass me the screwdriver?" he said. Eri nodded immediately, before running over to the other table. She stepped on a box to reach the tabletop and grabbed the screwdriver. When she handed it to Izuku, he looked down at it and frowned. Eri became worried when she saw this. Did I do something bad?" No, it's my fault," Izuku said, putting down the tool. "I should have been more specific. I needed the other type of screwdriver. I'm sorry." Eri still felt like she was at fault, despite her lack of knowledge. "It's not your fault." Izuku was cut off when the door to the lab suddenly opened. "Hey, are you Midoriya?" Izuku said a person in a hero costume. Izuku's face lit up. They were finally here. "Why, yes, that's me," Izuku responded quickly. "Well, hurry up, we're getting you out of here. Grab the kid, come on," the hero said, moving out of the way. Izuku immediately scooped Eri up in his arms and ran for the door. He ran past the door and towards freedom, or so he thought. He barely made it a foot past the door before the hero grabbed him by the back of his collar and threw him back into the room. Izuku fell onto his back, Eri spilling out of his arms and onto the floor. "Waga!" The hero snickered as he put his foot on Izuku's back. Izuku looked up and saw a sinister grin on the hero's face, and then Overhaul stepped in. "Midoriya, I don't believe you've met our friend here. This is 𝐓𝐢, one of the heroes on our payroll," Overhaul explained. "In fact, almost all the local heroes are on our payroll." The paid-off hero kicked Izuku in the ribs. Not that I need to get paid to not save your ass," the fake hero said. "You blacklisted me from getting support gear." Wait, Izuku realized something. "I recognize you. You're that hero who rushed in to fight a villain even while he was holding civilians hostage. 2 people died because of Yoa. I didn't even need to pay him this time. All I had to do was offer him the chance to put you in your place." Overhaul glared at him. "Perhaps next time you'll speak to me with more respect. You're free to beat him now, 𝐓𝐢. Just don't touch the girl." Overhaul left and 𝐓𝐢 smirked, before picking Izuku up by his hair. Gladly, 𝐓𝐢 punched Izuku in the face, before giving him another blow to the gut. "No, don't hurt him." Eri ran over to 𝐓𝐢 and started pulling on his pants sleeve. 𝐓𝐢 wanted to kick the girl off him, but Overhaul warned him against hurting her and he did not want to cross him. So instead he just kept beating up Izuku. Blow after blow after blow. 10 minutes later, 𝐓𝐢 slowed his assault and looked at his work. Izuku was beaten and bruised. His face was swollen and blood dripped from his mouth and nose. Satisfied, he dropped Izuku to the floor. Eri, whose eyes were swollen, red and filled with tears, clutched Izuku, relenting her uselessness. Izuku struggled, moving his arm to pet Eri's head in an attempt to comfort her. 𝐓𝐢 spat on the back of Izuku's head. Not so high and mighty now, huh? Hope you like it here, jackass, because there aren't any heroes to come and save you." And with that, the false hero left, slamming the door behind him, leaving Izuku to think about his parting words. Later that night, Izuku laid down in his bed, Eri clinging tightly to his side. Overhaul and sent some medics to patch up Izuku after 𝐓𝐢 left, only because Overhaul didn't want him to use his injuries as an excuse to slow down his work. Overhaul bought off most of the heroes in the area. Izuku thought, "There's a chance that there might not be any heroes to save us." Izuku's heart tightened, and his fist clenched. He looked down at Eri. She deserved so much. She deserved to be with a loving family, have warm, delicious food, and to be outside and happy. She deserved so much better than to be locked in here. He wanted to give her so much. And then, he had an epiphany. It felt like that itch had finally been scratched. If the heroes aren't going to save us, then I'll just have to do it myself. Izuku finally thought. For her sake, it was going to be dangerous, and he would have to be much more careful in his half-truths and lies. He would also need something that could both protect him and Eri, while also taking out the Yakuza. He looked around the lab, and his eyes landed on the chest armor. Armor. He needed armor. High-tech armor that was capable of taking attacks and that was stocked with weapons. And a few quark-erasing bullets too. He already had designs in his head, but there was one problem. In order to power something with enough defensive and offensive power to break out of here, he would need a power source that was both extremely potent and small enough to fit in the armor. Izuku started coming up with ideas rapidly, trying to see what he could use. And then his mind wandered to an old idea of his, one that he deemed would take too much time to research and produce. The arc reactor. Well, if the heroes weren't coming, then he had plenty of time. He grabbed his notebook and started sketching, rapidly moving his pencil around as he brought everything together. When he was done, he looked at his work, a suit of armor with the arc reactor at its core. He smiled widely at the design. Perhaps his long-standing love of heroes had influenced the design. But it didn't just look like a suit of armor. It looked like a hero that would liberate them both from this horrible place and bring joy back into their lives and smiles on their faces. And a hero needed a heroic name. As such, the Iron Man project was born. Izuku felt like a new man. It was like he was constantly hyped up on adrenaline as he worked feverishly on the designs of his armor. His brain was working on overdrive and he felt even smarter than he did normally. He'd never built a full armor suit before, but May had developed a few. 𝐻𝐡𝐷 had been a long-time friend of his, having worked with him since their early days in UA, with them being the two smartest students. They had done great work together. She and 𝐴𝐴𝐽 never really got along though. Even less so when they graduated from UA. May had a difficult time adjusting to no longer being financially backed by the school anymore, and her constantly blowing up their equipment, their expensive equipment, annoyed 𝐴𝐴𝐽 to no end. Had it not been for 𝐴𝐴𝐽's excellent control over their finances, then Midoriya Industries would have never got off the ground. Even after the company became successful, 𝐴𝐴𝐽 still disliked her. Izuku decided it was a good idea to keep the two away from each other, and Izuku would talk to May himself. It was only until after they got married did Izuku realize why 𝐴𝐴𝐽 hated the idea of him going to meet an attractive female by himself, away from her. Izuku smiled at his past stupidity. The arc reactor was the most important part and would likely take the longest. As such, he would like to focus on that first. However, he still needed to produce results with both the quirk erasing bullets and the other support equipment. So he would work on the armor, and when he finished, he would make weaker, single pieces of the armor and give them to Overhaul while he worked on the arc reactor and the quirk erasing bullets. It was a more chaotic schedule than he would have liked, but it was all he could do. Alright, the blueprint should be finished, Izuku muttered to himself. The blueprints for the armor was separated into different parts so as to not elect suspicion. Okay, so I'll start on the arc reactor for an hour, then move on to the helmet, Izuku muttered. Ari, it's time to get to work. The young girl nodded and gave him her adorably determined look. Izuku ruffled the hair of his tiny assistant as the two started on their day. 3 months later, boom. Darn it, Izuku shouted, hitting the blast shield in frustration. Iri brought him a drink to help cool him off, both literally and metaphorically. The arc reactor was proving to be troublesome. After 2 months of working, he had finally gotten the thing to turn on and the energy to flow. The issue was, finding a way to contain such potent energy in such a small object was proving to be a rather daunting task. In other news, he had made progress on the helmet and gauntlets, but he wouldn't be able to really finish any of the armor. He did make a lot of progress on the quirk erasing bullets. In fact, he would probably finish making the permanent version in a few months. Of course, he still had to give something to Overhaul, so he just made a slightly improved version of his bracer boots and handed it off to him. Izuku sipped his drink when suddenly he heard the door open. It was 2 of Overhaul's goons with a crate. "We're here to give you the food," said one of the goons. "Come in, and don't touch anything," Izuku told them. "Got it," the goon said. The goon then looked at the 2 goons guarding the doors. The guards nodded their heads, and the goon nodded his head back and then walked into the room, closing the door behind him. Izuku noticed the odd behavior and immediately took a stand in front of Iri. "What's going on? You want to get out of here, right?" the goon said in a hushed tone as he unpacked the food. Izuku's eyes widened. "What are you talking about? Keep it down," the other goon said. "If we want to pull this off, then we'll need to make sure Overhaul doesn't hear a word of what we're saying." "Language, and pull what off?" Izuku said in a hushed tone. "Destroying Overhaul and the Yakuza," the goon said. "What?" Izuku had to try not to shout out in shock. This had to be a trick of some kind. "You idiot, now you got him confused," the other goon scolded. "Let me explain. When he signed up for the Yakuza, we thought we were joining a criminal group with class, with respect, with honor, and back when the boss was in charge, it was like that. He knew what it meant to be a Yakuza, a real Yakuza. Then Overhaul put him into a coma and forced everyone to follow him, or else he'd kill him with his quirk. He filled the Yakuza with trash and rejects. He started crossing lines the boss said not to cross. He took a villain's name. And worst of all, he started mistreating the boss's grandkid." Izuku's eyes widened. "Iri is the granddaughter of the former Yakuza boss. No, I have to stay focused. If what he's saying is true, then I may be able to use it to my advantage. But why destroy it? Wouldn't you rather just kill Overhaul and take back control?" Izuku asked. "No, if we take out Overhaul and all the goons loyal to him, then we'll be too weak. Our enemies will take us out in a heartbeat," Goon 2 said. "And screw that. If the Yakuza's going out, then we're going out on our own accord," Goon 1 said. "So it looks like there are 2 groups, people who are loyal to Overhaul and people who want him dead. Let's call them the loyalist and the extremist," Izuku thought. "How many of you are there compared to the ones loyal to Overhaul?" Izuku asked. "We got bigger numbers, but Overhaul's guys are way stronger," Goon 2 scowled. "We'd never stand a chance if we tried to fight back on our own. But with those bullets, you'd be able to take away their advantage," Izuku finished. "So you want me to make the bullets and then help you and your allies take out Overhaul and his minions? I knew you were smart," Goon 1 smirked. "Okay, if I do this, what happens to me and Iri?" Izuku asked. "What do you think happens? You take the girl and get out of here," Goon 2 said. Izuku nodded. This could make my escape a lot easier. But still, if I help you, you'll kill 𝗏𝗏, right? 𝐻𝐡𝐚 asked. Duh, that jerk's gonna get what's coming to him, 𝐁1 said. 𝐻𝐡𝐚 frowned. I don't like the idea of killing someone, indirectly or not, but I'll need to erase 𝗏𝗏's quirk if I want to get out of here. And even if I refuse them and try to escape on my own, they'll probably take advantage of it and kill 𝗏𝗏 anyway. No matter what he did, if he escaped, 𝗏𝗏 would die. But, considering everything 𝗏𝗏's done, I can live with that, 𝐻𝐡𝐚 decided. If it's him or 𝐸, I'd choose 𝐸 to save in heartbeat. Okay, I'm in, 𝐻𝐡𝐚 said. All right, knew you'd say that, 𝐁1 celebrated. But I'm in charge. I was already planning on escaping, so I have a plan in mind, 𝐻𝐡𝐚 explained. You and your friends do as I say, and 𝗏𝗏 won't know what hit him. Sounds good to me, 𝐁2 said. What's the plan, boss? 2 months later, 𝐻𝐡𝐚 looked at the inactive arc reactor behind the blast shielding. Come on, please work, 𝐻𝐡𝐚 prayed under his breath. 𝐻𝐡𝐚 pushed the button, and the energy started flowing. The arc reactor lit up, getting bright and bright. 𝐻𝐡𝐚 looked at some screens next to him. Come on, come on. The energy kept glowing brighter as more power was growing inside the reactor. And now, 𝐻𝐡𝐚 said before pushing another button. The machine died down, but the reactor kept glowing brighter. Stabilize, 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 𝐻𝐡𝐚 begged. The light became even brighter, illuminating the entire lab and forcing 𝐻𝐡𝐚 to look away. Then, there was a flash of light. Before the light died down, 𝐻𝐡𝐚 looked back at the reactor. I did it, 𝐻𝐡𝐚 celebrated. I did it. The arc reactor was now glowing bright with energy and was perfectly intact. Finally, after all this time, he had done it. The most crucial part of his plan was finished. Now he could work on everything else. 𝐻𝐡𝐚. All 𝐻𝐡𝐚's celebrating had woken up 𝐸, who was sleeping soundly on the bed beforehand. Did the arc reactor finally work? Oh, 𝐸, did I wake you up? I'm sorry. And yes, it worked, 𝐻𝐡𝐚 said with a bright smiling on his face. Oh, that's good. 𝐸 didn't really understand what that meant, but 𝐻𝐡𝐚 was happy, and that was all that mattered to her. 𝐻𝐡𝐚 went over to the arc reactor and held it up with pride. This was the start. The time for escape would be nigh. Let's go back to sleep, 𝐸, 𝐻𝐡𝐚 said. I think I'll have good dreams tonight. 2 months later, 𝐻𝐡𝐚 looked at his finished formula. With this, his work on the quirk erasing bullet would be complete. Of course, he couldn't give this to 𝗏𝗏. He would give him a version that lasted longer than the previous version, but he would never give him the permanent one. 𝐻𝐡𝐚 had made rapid progress after the completion of his arc reactor. Having finished his helmet, and his chest plate would be done in a week or so. Alright, let's see how the arc reactor reacts to the gauntlet, 𝐻𝐡𝐚 said. The genius hooked up the reactor to one of his prototype gauntlets. The gauntlet lit up with a pleasing hum, working as 𝐻𝐡𝐚 expected. Okay, everything seems to be working fine. Let's try the flashlight. 𝐻𝐡𝐚 had installed a flashlight in the palm of the gauntlet, just in case he had to fight in the dark and the night vision feature in his helmet didn't work for whatever reason. 𝐻𝐡𝐚 flexed his wrist to turn on the flashlight, and 𝗵𝗲𝗏 he was knocked back, as a blast of arc reactor energy shot out of palm, hitting the wall and making a burnt crack. 𝐻𝐡𝐚 sat up, dazed from the knockback and the fall. 𝐸 had run over to make sure he was okay and helped him off the floor. I must have used way too much power, 𝐻𝐡𝐚 thought to himself as he got up off the floor. I'm going to have to lower that a lot. As 𝐻𝐡𝐚 got up, he spotted the crack in the wall. It was a pretty big crack considering that it was a thick concrete wall, meant to take large impacts from big explosions. After a few seconds of looking at it, he got an idea. Or maybe not, he considered. A month later, the chest plate had taken an extra week to finish, but that was only because 𝐻𝐡𝐚 had shifted focus into adding a new feature to his gauntlets and boots. Repulsor Blast. Using the arc reactor, 𝐻𝐡𝐚 would be able to focus the energy in his gauntlet and blast it out as a beam of light. In other words, he could shoot lasers out of his palms and feet. Why add this feature to his feet? Why not? Could come in handy. The armor itself was almost complete. He was working on the finishing touches now, and it should be done in another month or so. As the time of their escape drew closer, 𝐻𝐡𝐚 started to think of 𝐴𝐻𝐻𝐿. How was she doing? Had she moved on? What would he do if she didn't want him anymore? What if she didn't like 𝐸? What if 𝐻𝐡𝐚 shook his head? No, I can't think of 𝐴𝐻𝐻𝐿 like that. She'll be fine. When I come back, we'll all celebrate. As a family. He had almost no doubt he would adopt 𝐸 when they got out. The only possible issue that could disrupt that plan is if 𝐴𝐻𝐻𝐿 was against it. As he was thinking, one of the Yakuza goons that were on his side walked in. Hey, we got good news. Keep it down, 𝐻𝐡𝐚 reminded him. What is it? We got some help, the goon said. From Stain. Stain. 𝐻𝐡𝐚's mouth dropped. Why would the hero killer want to help us? Apparently he hates 𝗏𝗏 just as much as we do, the goon said. I don't know what 𝗏𝗏 did to cross the hero killer, but he must have really screwed the pooch. 𝐻𝐡𝐚 thought about this. While he was sure the hero killer would make the job easier, He was hesitant to work with Stain the hero killer, but if it meant securing Iri's safety. Alright, make sure he's actually on our side, Izuku told the goon. If he betrays us, it could be the end of all of us. Got it, the goon said before walking out. Izuku went back to his work. Soon all of this will be over. Just a bit more time. It was the day. Izuku reported that he had finished the bullet. And as expected, later that day, 𝗓𝗲 followed by Mimic and 𝐀𝐦 barged in. Where is it? 𝗓𝗲 demanded. Izuku rubbed his eye, giving a secret signal to the guards outside the door, who responded by blinking twice. Everything was going as planned, no diversions. I reported it as soon as it finished. Izuku said, it's right over on that table. I've also laid out the formula right next to it in case you wanted to see it. 𝗓𝗲 and his posse rushed past in, their attention laying solely on the bullet. Just as Izuku expected, Izuku stood by the door, with Iri by his side. He had only made her aware of the plan last night, and it was obvious she was nervous. If 𝗓𝗲 weren't so distracted, he probably would have noticed something was up. This is it. This is the start of our empire. 𝗓𝗲 held the bullet up to his face, admiring it. The guard blinked 3 times. Izuku blinked once and turned Iri away. Suddenly the 2 guards turned, aiming their assault rifles at 𝗓𝗲 and firing. 𝗓𝗲 didn't react until it was too late. 𝐻𝐻 𝐻𝐸 was shot. What the Mimic got hit. Suddenly, the small doll exploded, spitting out a large adult male. 𝗓𝗲 looked at the bullet launched in his arm. His eyes as wide as dinner plates as dread and anger filled his body. What have you done? My quirk did they Suddenly 𝐴𝐻𝐸 and Mimic were shot again. This time in the knees. The 2 guards had put aside their rifles and pulled out pistols that fired real bullets. Ew, traitors. 𝗓𝗲 instinctively tried to use his quirk, only remembering he couldn't when it was too late and he was shot in both his legs, leaving all 3 of them on the ground. Like our gun's boss. Goon 1 held up the rifle, modified by Midoriya himself. Looks just the real thing. Give the order. Izuku interrupted their gloating. Oh yeah. Goon 2 put his walkie-talkie up this mouth. It's time, boys. Give him hell. You bastards. What is this? Mimic asked. What do you think it is, doll boy? Goon 1 taunted. We've been planning this for months. See, that's the problem with hiring a genius against his will. He outsmarts you. Midoriya finished that bullet months ago, and it was a side project. Goon 2 laughed. Oh, I can't wait till you see what he was really working on. You planned this. 𝗓𝗲 glared at Izuku, who was walking over to one of the tables. Do you really think you'll get away with this? My men will die like the freaks they are. Goon 1 interrupted him. We got a bullet for each one of your little precepts of death, and even if they fail, Stain will take him out. You're done, Kai. Goon 2 used his real name to anger him. Don't call me that, you trash. 𝗓𝗲 shouted as he started crawling over to them. While the guards were taunting 𝗓𝗲, Izuku could hear the firing of guns getting closer to the lab. He couldn't waste any more time. Izuku kneeled down and opened the panel on one of the tables, before crawling inside. What the hell is he doing? Mimic asked. Oh, you'll see. Goon 1 laughed. Once Izuku was inside, he laid down perfectly flat, and in just the right position. Suddenly a blue light washed over him, scanning him and making sure that it was Izuku under the table and not anyone else. After a few seconds, the scanning was complete, and it moved on to the next phase, equipping the armor. Little mechanical arms moved to attach the pieces of the armor onto Izuku. First the boots, then the legs, then the chest, the arms, the gauntlets, and finally, the helmet. Then the pieces began to attach to one enough. Parts moved and stuck together until Izuku was fully sealed in the armor. Then the arms lowered the arc reactor into the chest piece. The arc reactor was put into place and locked in, powering up the armor with a pleasing hum. The HUD came to life, allowing Izuku to see, as well as giving him a full analysis of his surroundings and a status report of the armor. The top of the table opened up, breaking in half and giving Izuku his exit. He grabbed the top edge of the table and pulled himself up, revealing his gray Iron Man armor for all to see. Goon 1 whistled. There it is. What the hell is that? 𝗏𝗏 asked. Izuku looked at 𝗏𝗏. My escape. Nice line, Gia. Suddenly Goon 1 had a bottle thrown at his head. It's 𝗀𝗏𝗂, Goon 2 said before getting a bottle thrown at his head. Deidara 𝗀𝗏𝗂 ran into the room in a panicked, but still drunken, stupor. Boo us. The goons are shooting us, 𝗀𝗏𝗂 said, before looking at Izuku's armor. What the fuck is intoxication detected? Activating auto fire, said the armor's HUD. Izuku's palm flew upward, and the armor fired a repulsor blast right at 𝗀𝗏𝗂's chest. Wah! The blast hit its mark, sending the villain flying into the wall and onto the floor, knocked out cold. That thing shoots lasers. Mimic's eyes widened. Izuku got out of the table. He moved around awkwardly as he was unused to wearing the armor. Iri, it's time to go. Izuku picked up the girl as the 2 goons got off the ground. As Izuku walked out of the room, he nodded to the 2 goons, giving them the signal to finish it. They gave him a wicked smile and picked up their guns. Looks like the kids are away. Time for the guns to play. 𝐽1 said. That was so lame. Chrono deadpanned. Yeah, well, you're dead. 𝐽1 said. If you do this, then you'll destroy the 𝐜𝐡𝐬. �overhaul growled at the goons. The 𝐜𝐡𝐬 died when you took over. 𝐽2 cocked his gun. With 𝐬𝐡𝐬. Cover your ears, 𝐬𝐡𝐬. 𝐬𝐡𝐬 told her as he ran farther from the lab. 𝐬𝐡𝐬 nodded and put her hands over her ears. Bang, 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 bang. 4 gunshots went off behind them, signaling the end of overhaul, 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 𝐸𝐻, and 𝗳𝗏𝗧𝗏𝐿. 𝐬𝐡𝐬 grit his teeth. He didn't like it. He really didn't like it. All the death and destruction that would happen here would be his fault. But he had no choice. 𝐸𝐬, bring up a map of the base, 𝐬𝐡𝐬 said. In the corner of his HUD, a 3-dimensional map appeared of the 𝐜𝐡𝐬 base as well as multiple blips showing his enemies and allies. This was accomplished by hacking into the 𝐜𝐡𝐬's camera system. It looks like overhaul, 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬, 𝐸𝐻, 𝗫𝗎𝗎, and 𝗳𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 are all dead. 𝐬𝐡𝐬 looked through the cameras to see how well his plan worked. Ricky 𝐴𝐡𝐻𝐸 lost his quirk and is currently very injured. He probably won't be alive for long. Toya Setsuno, Yuhojo, and Sorimitsu Tabе are all still alive and have their quirks and are fighting off the goons together. Setsuno probably used his quirk to steal the guns before they could fire them. Kendo Rappa and Hekiji Tengai also have their quirks and are fighting them off. Damn it, this didn't go nearly as well as I thought. Most of them are trying to get to where overhaul was, meaning that they're all blocking my path. The plan was a simple one. Use the quirk erasing bullets to depower and kill overhaul and the 8 precepts of death. Without them, the enemy wouldn't stand a chance against 𝐬𝐡𝐬's forces. However, with most of the 8 precepts still alive, then their victory was no longer certain. Now they would have to do this the hard way. 𝐬𝐡𝐬's Iron Man Online. Report. 𝐬𝐡𝐬 activated the comms they had established for this mission. A distorted voice came in reply. Most of the goons are busy. I killed all the goons on the outside and I'm making my way through the facility now. Stain. 𝐬𝐡𝐬 immediately knew who this was. Stain was the only person whose voice would be distorted and the only person who would have come from the outside. Yes, Stain confirmed. Did everything go as planned? No, a few of the 8 precepts are still alive and blocking my path. They're too powerful for the goons to take alone. 𝐬𝐡𝐬 said. Tell me who to kill and where to go. Stain said. Suit, bring up Stain's location. One of the blue dots on 𝐬𝐡𝐬's map started blinking green. Right now you're closest to Setsuno, Hojo, and Tabе. Take 2 lefts then make a right. On it, Stain said. Hopefully, that should take care of them. 𝐬𝐡𝐬 looked at the map. But that still leaves Rappa and Tengai. They're closest to me and approaching fast. These goons won't be able to hold them. I need a plan and soon. 𝐬𝐡𝐬 looked at the maps and considered every option. Every room, every ally, every possible thing he could use. I think I have a plan, 𝐬𝐡𝐬 thought. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Toya Setsuno, Yuhojo, and Sorimitsu Tabe were fighting off the waves of traitorous 𝐜𝐡𝐬 goons. They hid behind Hojo and his crystals while the goons shot bullets at them. Setsuno stuck his hand out of cover and activated his quirk. One by one the guns the goons were using were taken from them until they were left without any weapons. Tabe ran out from behind the cover. Now that his enemies were disarmed, nothing was stopping his teeth from reaching the enemies. _HH. The screams of the goons resonated through the halls as their bodies were bitten into. Blood splashed onto the walls and floors as Tabe mauled them, tearing into their innards until they lay dead at his feet. Damn traitors. Setsuno dropped a few of the guns, keeping one just in case. We need to get to overhaul. Hojo deactivated his quirk. Tabe finished up eating part of one of the goons and looked in the direction of his 2 friends. His eyes went wide as he saw something behind them. Look out. Behind you. Huh. They turned just in time to see Stain, sword drawn and aimed for Setsuno's head. The blonde-haired criminal barely managed to move out of the way in time, with Stain's sword managing to nick his neck slightly, drawing a little bit of blood. Setsuno and Hojo backed up as far as they could, standing next to Tabe as the 3 of them got ready to fight. Who the hell are you? Setsuno shouted at him. He didn't recognize him as one of the traitors, meaning this was someone else. Stain grinned like the madman he was. The hero killer was wearing what could only be described as a cyber ninja outfit. He was covered in red and gray armor, with a red mask covering the upper half of his face. There was a utility belt around his waist, and the armor itself was covered in spikes and compartments to keep knives. He took the sword he cut Setsuno with and licked the blood off the blade. Suddenly Setsuno felt strange for a moment, and then he was unable to move. What the? I can't move. Setsuno panicked as he tried desperately to move any part of his body. The 𝐜𝐡𝐬 is an old disease that should have been cured long ago. The fact that trash like you still roams free is proof that our current hero system is a failure. Stain said. Allow me to fix their mistake. Hojo blinked, and Stain was in front of him, moving at speeds they could barely comprehend. His body reacted and crystallized his chest, just barely able to block Stain's blade from ripping into him. Hojo crystallized his arm, turning it into a hard, jagged pillar, and swung it at Stain. Stain jumped back, avoiding the attack. 𝗬𝗵 ran at 𝗧𝗏, his jaws open and ready to bite. He lunged at 𝗧𝗏, who ducked before sticking his swords through his chest. 𝗬𝗵. The two other villains cried out as their friend was impaled. 𝗧𝗏 slashed his swords through either side of 𝗬𝗵's body, sending his blood and innards flying through the air. His body dropped to the floor, dead. One down. 𝗧𝗏 pressed a button on his swords. They made a whirring noise and then started glowing red, energy crackling off of them like bolts of lightning. 2 more to go. You bastard. Hojo ran at 𝗧𝗏 with his crystallized body, his arms out and ready to smash. 𝗧𝗏 took out a small orb from one of his pouches and threw it out over Hojo's shoulder. You missed, you son of a. Before Hojo could finish, dozens of holes opened up in the orb, and extremely small daggers shot out in all directions, with about 8 of them stabbing into Hojo's back. 𝐻𝐻. Hojo stopped his charge as he recoiled in pain. Stab. While Hojo was recoiling, 𝗧𝗏 charged forward and buried his sword into his chest. Right through his crystals, right through his chest, right through his heart. The life faded from the man's eyes, and he fell limp onto 𝗧𝗏's sword. 𝗧𝗏 pressed the button and the red glow faded from his sword. He pulled the blade out of the man's chest, letting the body fall to the floor as he looked at his final victim. Setsuna was staring in disbelief at his friends' bodies. They had been killed, and so easily as well. And now he was going to die too. I'm glad I paralyzed you first. Your quirk would have been problematic for me to deal with, 𝗧𝗏 said as he walked towards the terrified man. The man was about to scream, but 𝗧𝗏 charged forward and cut off his head. Sorry, I'm in a rush, 𝗧𝗏 said. Now let's go find Midoriya. Meanwhile, elsewhere, 𝗀𝐻 and 𝗵𝗃 ran down the halls towards the lab with a group of loyal Yakuza goons. I still haven't heard anything from Overhaul, 𝗀𝐻 shouted. He was panicking. He'd been trying to contact Overhaul since the insurrection started, but he got no response. Jerk it fine. No way he'd get killed by one of these weak goons, 𝗵𝗃 said. They ran past a corridor, and one of the goons spotted something. Watch out, the goon warned. Izuku popped out of the corridor with both arms raised. He fired 2 quirk-erasing bullets at 𝗀𝐻 and 𝗵𝗃. 𝗀𝐻 was hit in the shoulder, but one of the Yakuza goons jumped in the way of the bullet meant for 𝗵𝗃. An attack. 𝗀𝐻 tried to put up a shield. Wait, my quirk. Are these our bullets? He tried using our own bullets against us. The bastard. The Yakuza goons charged at Izuku. Izuku's armor scanned the 5 goons coming at him and activated his shoulder-mounted mini-missile launcher. The missiles came out and blasted the goons away, sending them sprawling onto the floor unconscious. Next, he opened his palm and blasted 𝗀𝐻 in the chest with a repulsor blast, knocking 𝗀𝐻 out immediately. Looks like I might finally get a good fight out of this. 𝗵𝗃 smiled as he charged towards Izuku. 𝗵𝗃 charged at Izuku, hurling his fist at him at inhuman speeds. Izuku activated his repulsor blast in his feet and rocketed backwards into the hallway he came from away from 𝗵𝗃's attack. He landed far away from the villain, making sure there was a large distance between them. You're too slow, Izuku taunted. Come on, follow me. Don't run away. Fight me like a man. 𝗵𝗃 charged into the hallway towards Izuku. Good. This hallway is too narrow for him to dodge anything. He's like a fish in a barrel. Izuku blasted 𝗵𝗃 with his repulsor beam. The attack hit dead on, stopping him momentarily, but not doing all too much damage. Is that all you got? 𝗵𝗃 started charging at him again. Izuku fired again, this time with both his palms. 𝗵𝗃 brought his arms together, guarding against the attack as it hit him head-on. It knocked him back a few inches, but overall, didn't do much. He's tough, Izuku thought as 𝗵𝗃 started charging again. Increase the power of the repulsor blast to 50%. Izuku told the armor. After hearing his palms hum, he fired again at 𝗵𝗃. 𝗵𝗃 ran towards him with his arms up, ready to block any attack coming at him. The blast hit 𝗵𝗃, knocking him back a foot and leaving some burns on his arms. But the villain kept on running, getting closer and closer to Izuku. He doesn't have a durability quirk, he shouldn't be able to take these attacks so easily, Izuku thought. Increase repulsor power to 75% and switch from blast to beam. Izuku fired again. This time, rather than just a blast of energy, it came out as a continuous beam. The beam hit 𝗵𝗃's arms, this time with greater result in knocking 𝗵𝗃 back a few feet. 𝗵𝗃 dug his feet into the ground, smiling as his strength was really getting put to the test. Now that's more like it. Give me everything you got, Tin Man. It's Iron Man, Izuku corrected. And how are you enduring this? My body's taken plenty of blows. My skin's as tough as steel by now, 𝗵𝗃 responded as he started walking through the beam, slowly but surely making his way toward Izuku. Izuku looked at his suit's power bar. He had already used up 40% of his power and it was still draining. He really should have taken the time to increase the energy efficiency of the armor. I might run out of power before he goes down. And even if I might not have enough power to get out of here, Izuku thought. If I use 100% power, I might still not be able to take him down quick enough. Will I have to use that? If I do, then that'll use another chunk of my power. Izuku calculated his options in his head, all while 𝗵𝗃 was getting closer to him. I have no choice. I have to use it. 𝐬𝐡𝐚𝐭 turned off his repulsor beams. "What's wrong, 𝐜𝐡𝐤 𝐍𝐴 came running at him. "Reroute all power to the arc reactor," 𝐬𝐡𝐭 ordered the armor. 𝐬𝐡𝐭 waited until 𝗵𝗃 was almost right on top of him, his fist cocked and ready to punch 𝐬𝐡𝐭's lights out. 𝐬𝐡𝐭 opened up his arms, leaving his chest wide open. 𝐸𝐴 A bright and massive beam of light engulfed 𝗵𝗃, consuming him completely before rushing through the rest of the hull, then into the room 𝐻𝐸 and the Yakuza were in, and then through the wall. Nothing stopped it as it destroyed everything in its path. The beam only lasted for about 7 seconds before dying down. With the light gone, 𝐬𝐡𝐭 could see what had happened. 𝗵𝗃 was gone, and there was a hole in the room the knocked out Yakuza were in that lead all the way through the base. Power at 20%. The armor warned him. 𝐬𝐡𝐭 winced. He would have to be strict on his power consumption, but he could make it. But first, "Armor, where is 𝗵𝗃?" 𝐬𝐡𝐭 asked the armor. The armor scanned for the answer. "He is no longer on the map. Cameras suggest he has been blasted out of the facility. So he's not dead?" 𝐬𝐡𝐭 asked hopefully. "Unlikely," the armor answered. 𝐬𝐡𝐭 would have liked to confirm that himself, but he needed to get out in there and fast before he ran out of power. "Iri," 𝐬𝐡𝐭 shouted into the hallway. "Coast is clear." After a few moments, Iri came running from her hiding spot. "Are you okay, 𝐬𝐡𝐭?" Iri asked, concerned that maybe he had gotten hurt. "I'm fine," 𝐬𝐡𝐭 said, picking her up into his arms. "We need to go." 𝐬𝐡𝐭 walked through the halls. He would run, but running would drain the battery faster. He looked at the map. Most of his forces had been taken down by the Precepts and were now being killed by the remaining overhaul goons. And a large assortment of remaining goons was now slowly gathering together, coming towards 𝐬𝐡𝐭 as he was on the path to where the lab was, Overhaul's last known location before the attack happened. Looking at all the remaining Yakuza and their locations, "I'll likely run into 20 thugs before I can get to the exit," 𝐬𝐡𝐭 thought. "And Stain is currently dealing with the remaining thugs. I don't have enough power to use my weapons on all of them. I'll have to take them down hand to hand. Disable all weapon systems and go into power conservation mode," 𝐬𝐡𝐭 ordered. "Weapons systems offline," the computer said. 𝐬𝐡𝐭 looked at the weapons the Yakuza were holding through the camera. "Guns and swords won't do anything, so they won't be a problem. 3 rocket launches? Those will hurt. I'll need to do something about those." He was getting closer to the goons and he had a plan in mind. "Kind of, Iri," he addressed her as he set her down. "Run the other way until you're out of sight." Iri nodded and did as she was told. 𝐬𝐡𝐭 turned around. He could hear the goons coming into the room ahead and he ducked into the corner of the hallway so he was barely out of sight. He punched the concrete wall with his fist and pulled out 2 chunks of it and held one in each fist. "Time to be a hero," 𝐬𝐡𝐭 thought. He charged into the room facing each of the Yakuza thugs. He threw the 2 chunks of wall at 2 of the rocket launcher-wielding goons, hitting them in the head and knocking them out. 18. The gun-wielding goons fired at him, their bullets bouncing off his armor like they were nothing. As the last rocket-wielding goon was taking aim, a katana-wielding goon charged at him, only for 𝐬𝐡𝐭 to grab him by the throat and throw him at the last rocket launcher goon, making them both fall to the floor and drop their weapons, but not taking them out of the fight. 2 more katana-wielding goons came at him, their swords doing no more damage than the bullets. 𝐬𝐡𝐭 grabbed their heads and smashed them together, knocking them into unconsciousness. 16. One of the goons tried to grab one of the fallen rocket launchers. 𝐬𝐡𝐭 won the katanas and threw it at that goon, the butt of the sword hitting him in the face. 15. One of the goons decided to use his quirk and turned his head into iron. He grabbed 𝐬𝐡𝐭 and tried to headbutt him, but 𝐬𝐡𝐭 caught his head with his hands and kneed him in the stomach. Then he pushed him to the ground and grabbed him by one of his legs. He picked the goon up in the air and charged towards 3 of the gun-wielding goons and hit them all with the iron-headed goon's head, using him like a mace and taking them all out. Then 𝐬𝐡𝐭 threw him at one of the other goons. 10. While 𝐬𝐡𝐭's back was turned, another goon tried to use his quirk on him as well, turning his nails into razor-sharp claws. Attack from behind detected. The armor warned 𝐬𝐡𝐭. 𝐬𝐡𝐭 whipped his head back, hitting the goon with the back of his helmet and knocking him to the floor. 𝐬𝐡𝐭 turned around and stomped on his face. 9. 𝐬𝐡𝐭 saw that the thug he threw at the rock launcher goon and the rocket launcher goon were getting back up. He dug his hands into the floor and picked up 2 slabs of concrete before throwing it at them, knocking them out once and for all. 7. One of the thugs for whatever reason tried to take 𝐬𝐡𝐭 on with his fist. He probably had a minor strength quirk. It didn't matter to 𝐬𝐡𝐭 one bit, who just caught both his fists and head-butted him over and over and over again until he was out. 6. Attack from behind detected. The armor warned him. Boom. 𝐬𝐡𝐭 shouted. One of the goons had managed to pick one of the rocket launches and fired it at 𝐬𝐡𝐭's shoulder. Armor integrity at 70%. The computer said. 𝐬𝐡𝐭's shoulder was somewhat burnt and parts of it were slightly broken. He was sweating inside the armor. The armor had taken most of the force and heat, but he could still feel it a little. 𝐬𝐡𝐭 saw one of the goons heading for the other rocket launches and he lunged at him, tackling him onto the floor. He pushed the goon down underneath him and punched him in the face, his head hitting the floor with enough force to crack it, rendering him unconscious. 5. Attack from behind detected. The armor warned. Izuku looked behind him and saw another goon had picked up the rocket launcher and aimed it at him. He rolled off away just as the goon fired, causing him to miss and the rocket to hit the wall. Izuku grabbed one of the guns that a goon dropped and fired it at the goon's legs. The goon fell to the ground, his knees bleeding. 4. Izuku picked up another gun and started opening fire on the Yakuza, who ran and dived away from the gunfire in their attempts to avoid it, but 2 of them got hit, leaving them bleeding and lying on the floor. 2. The 2 Yakuza goons looked at Izuku with terror in their eyes. Then, one of the goons took out a knife and slit the other one's throat, surprising Izuku. 1. The remaining goon started drinking the spurting blood from the goon's neck. His eyes turned red, his muscles started bulging out of his clothes, and his hair turned white. Izuku looked at the now powered up and much more intimidating goon, and readied himself to fight. 14% power. 1 goon left. The goon charged at Izuku, cocking his fist back to attack Izuku. He caught both of his fists, locking them into a contest of strength. Izuku pushed his arms back, his armor giving his greater power. However, the goon weighed more than Izuku, and so he slammed Izuku up into the low ceiling. Izuku crashed onto the ground and the goon stomped on his head, over and over and over, until Izuku grabbed his ankle and gripped it with all his strength and the goon's bones gave off a cracking sound. The goon took his foot away from Izuku. Izuku got up and charged at the goon, pinning him into a wall. Then he punched him in the face with everything he had, beating him over and over. The goon tried to punch Izuku off of him, but Izuku blocked the attack with his left arm before socking him with his right. He kneed him in the stomach, broke one of his ribs, broke his nose, and broke his jaw. Then he kicked the goon's leg out from under him, causing the goon to fall on his knee, brought both his fists together and raised them over the goon's head. Crack, and brought it down on the goon's head, knocking him out and sending him onto the floor. Done. Izuku breathed in deeply, struggling for breath. He wanted to take off the faceplate so he could breathe a bit better, but he needed to see the 𝐻𝐸 to see the map and his power bar. And after spending almost a year inside this hell, he needed freedom more than air anyway. He looked at his power bar. 8%. Then he looked at his map. All of the enemies were either knocked out or dead. It was just him, Eri, and Stain. Speaking of Stain, Midoriya, are you still alive? Came Stain's distorted voice from his armor's communication system. I'm alive. They're gone. All the enemies have been neutralized. Izuku reported. It's just you, me, and the girl. Can you get out of here all right, sir? Stain asked. I'm fine. My armor is at 80% power and all my weapons are fully operational. Izuku lied. He didn't know if Stain was going to betray them, so he couldn't let him know how valuable he was. Well, then it looks like my job is done. And with that, Stain cut communications. And seconds later he vanished off the map. Izuku wanted to ask him why he helped him, but using his comms had taken him down to 7%. Armor, turn off all combat-related abilities. He needed to conserve power. Eri, come on, we need to go. After a minute, Eri arrived, standing in front of him. Eri, I'm running out of power, so I need you to walk, okay? Izuku told her. Eri nodded while giving him a concerned look. The two walked through the base, Izuku turning off functions throughout to conserve power. Turn off all HUD options besides the map in the power bar. Done. Reduce the size of the map to only our escape route. Done. Turn off speakers. Eventually, the two reached a fake wall that led to the above-ground building. Izuku punched through it, now having 5% power left. Turn off the map, Izuku said, the map disappearing from his HUD. The two walked through the building until they finally reached the exit. Finally, Izuku said. Eri could only hear his muffled voice from inside the armor after he turned off the speaker. Izuku slid open the door, and immediately the two of them were hit with sunlight. The two of them covered their eyes, this having been the first time they'd seen the sun in a long, long time. The two walked through the garden. True to Stain's word, it was filled with dead Yakuza, their bodies bleeding and slumped over, the blood dyeing all the flowers into roses. Izuku covered Eri's eyes as they walked through and up to the gates. Izuku put his hand on the gates. He cocked his other arm back. Punch, punch, punch. The door broke off, and the two stepped out, finally leaving that horrible place behind. Eri looked around at the city in front of her, staring at the cars, the trees, the building, and the people who were looking at them oddly. She turned to Izuku. Are we free now? Disengage and deactivate armor, Izuku said. Suddenly, the armor unlocked itself, its individual pieces twisting and turning before falling off, until finally, Izuku was free. He breathed in the fresh air for the first time in almost a year. Yes, Eri. Yes, we are. The two of them looked at each other for a moment, before the tears started rolling down their faces. Eri leapt into Izuku's arms as the two sobbed with joy. It had been so long. So long. But finally, the nightmare was over. After a few minutes of just them crying, a black limo pulled up in front of them. A door swung open, and out came his wife 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 𝐈𝐬. The two looked at each other in shock for a moment, before 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 started to cry. She ran to 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐬, and the two embraced before kissing passionately over their reunion. The kiss lasted for a good long while until the two finally separated. "It's you," 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 cried. "It's really you. It's me." 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐬 smiled like an idiot. The amount of happiness and relief he felt was indescribable. "How did you find me? How did you know I was here?" "We received a tip that you might be here." 𝐲𝐶 got out of the limo. "At first we thought it was some kind of prank, but since we were in the area we decided to drive over here. We thought you were dead." 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 broke down, sobbing in his arms. "Where have you been? What happened to you?" "So much," was all 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐬 could say. "So much has happened, I don't even know where to start. But I do know something. I want 3 things." "And what would that be, sir?" 𝐲𝐶 asked. "I want to adopt this girl." 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐬 gestured to 𝐸𝐻𝐡, who was looking at 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 from behind his leg. "Her name is 𝐸𝐻𝐡." 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬's eyes went wide. "Adopt?" She looked into 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐬's eyes, his pleading, desperate, hopeful eyes. "We can talk about it some more later," 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 said. 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐬 smiled. That was basically a yes. "Next, once the police and the government and the heroes are all done here, I want to buy this land." 𝐲𝐶 raised an eyebrow in confusion. "You want to buy this place?" "Yes," 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐬 confirmed. "Then I want the building torn down, the tunnels demolished and caved in, every scrap of this place destroyed. Then I want to turn it into a graveyard." He wanted this place so destroyed that only the dead would live there. "And lastly," 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐬 turned to 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬, "I want to get far, far away from this place, go home, and hug my wife and daughter until we fall asleep." 𝐻𝐡𝐻𝐸𝐬 smiled at him through the tears. "That can be arranged." They all climbed into the limo, but as 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐬 was getting in, he looked at the armor. "𝐲𝐶, put the armor in the trunk," 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐬 ordered. "Any particular reason why, sir?" 𝐲𝐶 asked. "I don't know," 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐬 said. "It just wouldn't feel right to leave without it." 𝐲𝐶 looked at 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐬 for a moment, before turning around to do as he was told, hiding his grin all the while. "You've changed, boss, and I think I'm going to like the result." After the armor was put into the car, 𝐀𝐦 got in, and they all rode away, leaving the Yakuza behind and never turning back. The aftermath of 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐬's breakout was more straightforward than one might have thought, mainly because 𝐻𝐡𝐻𝐸𝐬 gave anyone who tried to give him a hard time absolute hell. Of course, there was, a court case wherein it was discussed whether 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐬 was responsible for all the deaths that were caused during the Yakuza civil war. However, due to lack of physical evidence, 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐬 was acquitted. Now there was one more thing he needed to address. "Well, 2 actually." "What do you mean no?" 𝐻𝐡𝐻𝐸𝐬 asked in a baffled tone. "I mean we can't give the arc reactor tech to anyone. And we can't start mass producing them," 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐬 explained. "We have to keep this technology to ourselves, at least for the time being." The two of them were in their house. Well, calling it a house would be doing it a disservice. Their home was a 5-story manor, built out in the forested part of the city. This was a compromise, as 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐬 wanted a smaller house away from people, and 𝐻𝐡𝐻𝐸𝐬 wanted a big house in the middle of the city to display dominance. 𝐻𝐡𝐻𝐸𝐬 had 2 sides to her when it came to money. There was the shrewd businesswoman side that haggled in every transaction, and would always make sure the company would never lose too much money or overspend. This side even made its way into their personal life back when the company was in its infancy. However, once they started getting absurd amounts of money, 𝐻𝐡𝐻𝐸𝐬 gained a new side of her. The side of her that screamed, "I was once poor and now I'm rich and I've definitely let the money get to my head" a little side. This side only ever appeared in their personal life. This part of her would spend lots of money on lavish luxury items and other expensive commodities. And this was the side of her that showed in the mansion. The living room, located on the 3rd floor, was a miniature movie theater with reclining couches, an extremely large flat-screen TV, and huge speakers. It was even connected to their second kitchen, which was filled with snacks. The 1st floor was for parties and was large enough to accommodate large swarms of people, although they rarely ever throw parties. 2nd floor is where they would entertain guests, as well as being equipped with an exercise room and a room for sports that resembled a gym. It was also where the guest rooms and the rooms for the staff were. Outside was their ridiculously huge, complete with a beautiful garden that their gardeners maintained and a pool. 4th floor had a sauna as well as several other rooms for relaxation. And the 5th floor had their master bedroom, their master bathroom, their office, another kitchen in case they got hungry late in the night, and their special room. A room guest and 𝐸𝐻𝐸 were not allowed in under any circumstance, and the room 𝐻𝐡𝐻𝐸𝐬 and 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐬 would spend a lot of time in whenever one of them had a bad day, when the mood was right, or whenever 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐬 talked to May by himself for any time over an hour. Their bedroom was lavish, having the best TV and furniture money could buy, and a bed so soft it was like sleeping on a cloud. The walls were covered in expensive paintings and other pieces of art, all of it only there so 𝐻𝐡𝐻𝐸𝐬 could revel in their money. Currently, the two of them were in the master bedroom, discussing whether or not they should sell the arc reactor technology. But why not? 𝐬𝐡𝐬𝐽, this is the world's most powerful source of clean energy. With this, we could become the most powerful people in the world. All the world's governments would be begging us for favors, 𝐻𝐚𝐽 nearly shouted, still keeping her voice low enough so 𝐸𝐸, who was currently brushing her teeth, couldn't hear them. And what happens if that power lands in someone else's hands? 𝐬𝐸 pulled out his computer. Take a look at this. 𝐬𝐸 showed her the computer screen which had on it 2 charts. 𝐻𝐚𝐽 looked at her eyes growing wide. This, the amount of products we've made and the amount of money we're receiving? Someone stealing from us. 𝐴𝐴𝐻 told me that people in our company were selling our tech to villains, 𝐬𝐸 revealed to her. 𝐻𝐚𝐽's eyes went even wider. If we didn't hear about this until now, then they must be in pretty deep. They'd have to alter reports that go all the way directly to us. Either that or they have a lot of people in the lower levels spreading misinformation. Either way, the company is compromised, 𝐬𝐸 said. I'm not releasing any new tech, let alone the arc reactor, until we're sure this leak is plugged. 𝐻𝐚𝐽 gave him a look of pure determination. Then let's plug the leak. 𝐻𝐚𝐽 picked up her smart pad and started jotting things down. Firstly, we need to lower the number of products we're distributing. It'll be easier to notice if something's missing when we're not putting out so much of it. Also, we need to get some more supervisors to look over our already existing distribution, people with completely clean backgrounds. We also need to put better tracking on our stuff. I'll redesign the tech to include some more tracking equipment, 𝐬𝐸 added. We also need to do something about the tech that's already out there. Maybe I can design something to shut down our tech. And what if that gets stolen? 𝐻𝐚𝐽 gave him a serious look. If that gets into the villain's hands, that could cause some serious damage to the company. 𝐬𝐸 thought about it for a moment. Then it will have exclusive distribution. I'll make the devices personally, and we'll give it to the heroes we know. That sounds better. 𝐻𝐚𝐽 approved. We also need to up the security, 𝐬𝐸 said. As the two spat out ideas, 𝐸𝐸 came out of the bathroom. Daddy, Mommy, what are you doing? 𝐸𝐸 eyed the smart pad curiously. Once 𝐸𝐸 understood what adoption was, it didn't take her long to start calling them that. She was rather starved for affection, but fortunately, 𝐻𝐚𝐽 and 𝐬𝐸 had plenty of it to give. Oh, we're just talking about some boring business stuff. 𝐻𝐚𝐽 lifted 𝐸𝐸 onto her lap. How was your day with 𝐀𝐦, sweetheart? While the two of them dealt with court, 𝐀𝐦 was assigned to guard 𝐸𝐸. Oh, okay. 𝐸𝐸 seemed upset. I missed you. Oh, we missed you too, 𝐸𝐸. 𝐬𝐸 came in and hugged both of them. Don't worry, we'll have plenty of time to spend with you from here on. That's right, Daddy and Mommy are going to make sure you have lots of fun with you. 𝐻𝐚𝐽 smiled brightly at her. But for now, it's time for good little girls to go to bed. Okay, 𝐸𝐸 said. With that, it was basically decided that all of them would go to bed. 𝐸𝐸 didn't get her own room, rather she shared one with them for the time being. She needed almost constant attention from either one of them, and she couldn't really sleep without one of them either. The three of them laid down, 𝐬𝐸 on the left and 𝐻𝐚𝐽 on the right, with 𝐸𝐸 in between them, holding on to 𝐬𝐸. Mommy, Daddy, I love you. 𝐸𝐸 snuggled up into 𝐬𝐸's side. 𝐬𝐸 and 𝐻𝐚𝐽 could feel their hearts melt. We love you too, 𝐸𝐸, 𝐬𝐸 whispered. With all our hearts. 𝐻𝐚𝐽 put her arm over her. A few minutes later, she was asleep. Is it wrong that I feel like it was worth it? 𝐬𝐸 asked his wife. All the pain, all that time apart, all those lives that were taken. Is it bad that I feel like it was all worth it just to get her? She's definitely one of the few upsides that came out of this. 𝐻𝐚𝐽 played with 𝐸𝐸's hair lovingly. You know, if we're stopping the creation of all new products, then we'll have to fire me. 𝐬𝐸 gave her a deadpan stare. Seriously? Are you seriously doing this? What? She's never gonna stop creating no matter how much we tell her to, so our only solution is to fire her. 𝐻𝐚𝐽 said it was the most obvious thing in the world. 𝐻𝐚𝐽, we both know May is fine with just making things, even if we don't sell them. 𝐬𝐸 rolled his eyes. I am so surprised you didn't fire her while I was gone. Why can't you two just get along? Because she blows up all our expensive equipment, makes it nearly impossible for anyone to work with her because of over-the-top personality. And the fact that she refuses to take a bath, and the fact that we have to pay her bills for her, otherwise she'll forget and end up living in the lab, which she basically does anyway. 𝐻𝐚𝐽 ranted while still whispering. 𝐬𝐸 shook his head. 𝐻𝐚𝐽, I have never found anyone who makes me feel a quarter as happy as I do when I'm with you, except for 𝐸𝐸. The best day of my life is the day I proposed to you and you said yes. And now we have a daughter. You don't need to worry about someone taking me away. 𝐻𝐚𝐽 blushed intensely. Geez, why can't you be this confident all the time? Because unfortunately, you're not with me all the time, 𝐬𝐸 told her. You know I wish I could be, 𝐻𝐚𝐽 said in a serious tone. I always worry about you. We already agreed that 𝐸𝐸's gonna see a therapist, so maybe it's time you saw one too. 𝐬𝐸 looked away, a frown stretching across his face. I can't. 𝐸𝐸 needs a strong father, someone she can look up to. Unfortunately, all she has is me. And that's more than enough, 𝐻𝐚𝐽 argued. You're not weak for seeking help, that just makes you human. 𝐬𝐸 didn't respond. You know, 𝐀𝐦 tells me what you're like when I'm not here. How miserable and despondent you are. How you stay cooped up in the house even when I deliberately tell you not to. I'm sorry. When you're not with me it feels like back before we met, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 told her. I feel aimless. I keep making support gear but it never feels like enough. I always feel like I should be doing more. But I have 𝐸𝐸 now, and she makes me feel useful and happy. But one day 𝐸𝐸's gonna grow up, and she'll have her own life. 𝐴𝐻𝐸 reminded him. As much as I love being the center of your world, you can't depend on two people to hold your life together. 𝐬𝐻𝐸, that's just not healthy. We have friends. Why don't you spend more time with them? Invite them over without me telling you for once. I don't want to waste their time. They're heroes. They have very important things to do, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 said. Not on their days off. 𝐴𝐻𝐸 pointed out. 𝐬𝐻𝐸, what would you do if something happened to me? Don't say that, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 said a bit too loudly, making 𝐸𝐸 squirm. There was a short pause, as tears started pouring down 𝐬𝐻𝐸's eyes. I spent almost a year without you, and that was all I needed to know that I never want to be without you. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 looked up at 𝐴𝐻𝐸 with begging, teary eyes. Please, don't leave me. 𝐴𝐻𝐸 looked into his eyes and was reminded of her job. The job she'd had for almost as long as they'd known each other. She didn't get paid ridiculous amounts of money to keep their finances or to manage the company or to make appearances in his stead. Her job was to keep him together and do the things he can't. She was his other half and he needed her. And so she held his head and whipped away his tears, as she had done many times before. Look at me. Focus on me. 𝐴𝐻𝐸 repeated the line she had said many times before. She knew 𝐬𝐻𝐸's mind was a chaotic mess of ideas and thoughts. So she had to make him look at her. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 did just that, looking at her eye to eye. You've made me the happiest woman in the world. I will never leave you, 𝐴𝐻𝐸 told him. But I worry about you. I'll take care of the whole leak thing. You just make things to shut down our tech. Take care of 𝐸𝐸, and find something new that makes you happy. I don't care if it's friends, a new project, or a new hobby. Just find something. Please, it'll give me peace of mind. Okay, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 whispered. 𝐴𝐻𝐸 smiled and brought their faces together for a quick kiss. Good night, dear, 𝐴𝐻𝐸 said. Good night, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 said. A week later, the progress on sealing up the leak was slower than they would have liked. It would take a while for 𝐴𝐻𝐸 to put all the new policies and changes into effect, meaning for the time being they couldn't catch anyone. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 had already finished working in his home lab, located in the basement, on a dish that when applied to one of his devices would cause it to shut down. Being as it was his own tech, it didn't take 𝐬𝐻𝐸 long to make the disk. 𝐸𝐸 served as his little assistant as she had during his time with the Yakuza, complete with a mini lab coat and goggles, which 𝐴𝐻𝐸 had made sure would be slightly too big for her, adding to her inherent cuteness. With the disk finished, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 wasn't really sure what to do now. He thought about 𝐴𝐻𝐸's words, finding something that he loved aside from 𝐸𝐸 and 𝐴𝐻𝐸. He didn't even know where to start with something like that. Daddy, 𝐸𝐸 tugged on his lab coat, snapping him out of his thoughts. Oh, yes, 𝐸𝐸, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 responded. Are you gonna fix the suit? 𝐸𝐸 pointed to his armor, which was laid out on a table, untouched since it had gotten there. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 was about to say no. He really didn't have much of a use for it anymore. However, as he looked at it, the more the idea seemed tempting. The Iron Man armor really didn't have any practical use for him anymore. Even if he wanted to improve, mass produce and sell the thing like he did with most of his inventions, he couldn't. Using the armor was more complicated than one might think. After all, it was designed to be used by him, the creator of the armor, and him alone. And as such, using it would require you have intricate knowledge of how the suit works and its many mechanisms. Despite this, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 had an urge to work on it for a reason he couldn't quite fathom. It was like it was calling to him. Well, I guess this might be what 𝐴𝐻𝐸 was talking about, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 thought. It was a shot in the dark, but, well, there was no reason not to do it. I think I will, 𝐸𝐸, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 told her. In fact, hand me my tools. I think I have a few ideas. A few days later, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 and 𝐸𝐸 were in the middle of their gym room, which for the time being 𝐬𝐻𝐸 was using as a test room. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 had on the gauntlets and boots of the armor, as well as having the arc reactor strapped to his chest and connected to the boots and gauntlets by wires. There were giant pillowy cushions laid out around the area, and 𝐸𝐸 stood by with a fire extinguisher. This was to protect 𝐬𝐻𝐸 as he tried something new using the arc reactor energy and his repulsors. Flight. Okay, 𝐸𝐸, you remember how to use the fire extinguisher, right? 𝐬𝐻𝐸 asked her nervously. 𝐸𝐸 nodded and held up the nozzle. All right, test number 1. Testing to see if I can achieve lift at 50% power. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 said. Go. Smack. The repulsors came to life and immediately catapulted 𝐬𝐻𝐸 into the air, smacking him against the high ceiling. Oh, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 groaned, deactivating the repulsors and letting him fall onto the cushions. Daddy, are you okay? 𝐸𝐸 came running over, concerned for her father's safety. Are you on fire? No, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 groaned, getting up slowly from the cushion. I'm fine. My face just hurts a little. A few minutes later, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 and 𝐸𝐸 got back into position after 𝐬𝐻𝐸 lowered the power output. Okay, 50 was too much, let's try 35%. Izuku said. Go. The repulsors activated and lifted Izuku into the air. The green-haired man only had seconds to react and keep himself from splatting against the roof again. Izuku tried to maneuver himself, but he was moving too fast. He went flying around the gym for a few seconds before hitting a wall face first. Oh, Izuku said again, stopping the repulsors and falling onto the cushion once again. Okay. Clearly, I have underestimated the power output of the reactor and the upgraded repulsors. Izuku groaned. Let's try recalibrating them and then lowering the output again. Half an hour later, after recalibrating the armor and adjusting the power, they got back into position again. All right, test 3. 20% power. Izuku readied himself. Go. The repulsors flared to life and lifted Izuku into the air, this time slower than the last 2 times. Okay, going better than last time, Izuku said. Before he could reach the ceiling, she tilted his palms to the left, causing him to fly towards the other wall. Izuku maneuvered through the air, just barely managing to not hit the walls. Okay, that's enough. Izuku deactivated the repulsors, letting himself fall onto the cushion once again. You did it, Daddy. Yuri celebrated, taking Izuku not hitting a wall as a success. Not quite, Izuku said. The maneuverability is a bit too hard to get a handle on. I'll have to lower the power again. You probably should have done this outside if you wanted to do this. Yuri jumped at the sound of a new voice and quickly ran to hide behind her father's leg. Izuku looked at the entrance and saw 3 familiar faces. Tamaki, Hado, Tagada. Izuku called out in shock at seeing them all here. What are you all doing here? Is it so weird to visit a friend after they were kidnapped for almost a year? Mirio asked rhetorically. We were all pretty worried about you after you disappeared, Tamaki said. And you didn't even see us after you got out, 𝐻𝐸𝐻 complained. Sorry, so much happened that I kinda forgot to do that. Izuku rubbed the back of his head nervously, only for the heat from the repulsors to singe his hair. Oh, we tried to call you, but I guess you lost your phone a while ago, huh? Mirio said. Daddy, do you know them? Yuri asked him nervously. Daddy, all 3 of them asked at the same time, giving him curious looks. Oh, this is my daughter Yuri. She was also being held hostage by the Yakuza, and so when we escaped, I adopted her. Izuku explained. Yuri, these are Tamaki Amajiki, 𝐻𝐸𝐻 Hado, and Mirio Tagada, also known as Sun Eater, 𝐻𝐸𝐻 and Lemillion. They're all high-ranking pro-heroes, and Lemillion is the #1 hero. Heroes. Yuri clung even closer to Izuku, not seeming comforted by that fact in the slightest. Izuku was confused by this until he remembered the corrupt pros that were in the Yakuza's pocket. They're nothing like those fake heroes at the Yakuza base. We can trust them, Izuku told her. I promise. Tamaki and me have actually been friends for a while now. That actually did make Yuri ease up a little, but only a little. Fake heroes? Tamaki inquired. Yeah, the Yakuza paid off some of the local pro heroes in the area. He even used one of them to try and discourage me, Izuku told them. I tried to get them arrested after I got out, but apparently Stain got to them before I could. You think that's a coincidence? Mirio asked in a serious tone. Definitely not. He was there at Yakuza base when he escaped, Izuku explained. He helped us escape. Really? 𝐻𝐸𝐻 asked in shock. Did he have something against the Yakuza? Maybe they killed someone he thought was a real hero. Or maybe Stain was never a fan of criminals, so if anything he's probably wanted to get rid of the Yakuza for a while now and used the little civil war they had as an opportunity to do it. Mirio theorized. Most likely. Izuku agreed. I hate that I had to work with that psychopath. Mirio put a hand on his shoulder. I wasn't there, but I trust you wouldn't have done it if you didn't have to. You stopped the Yakuza and saved this adorable unicorn. Yeah, I'll tell you more about everything later. But did you guys need anything? Izuku asked. Nope. Mirio gave his usual ultra-bright smile. Just came to see you. It's been a long time. I'm glad you're all right. Tamaki smiled slightly. Yeah, you should give us your new phone number, 𝐻𝐸𝐻 said. Oh, of course. Izuku looked down at Yuri. Yuri, could you get me my phone? Yuri looked at Izuku, and then at the trio, and then at the desk with the phone on it. She quickly ran over to the desk as fast as her little legs would let her, and grabbed the phone, then just as quickly ran back to him and handed him the phone before hiding back behind his leg. There we go, thank you, Yuri. Izuku smiled at her. Now, Izuku realized there was an issue. You can't use a touchscreen with Iron Man gauntlets. Izuku blushed with embarrassment at only just realizing this now. Need some help? Mirio chuckled slightly. I'll do it. 𝐻𝐸𝐻 swooped in and took his phone. Oh, the password is Izuku got cut off. Chaco's birthday, I know. 𝐻𝐸𝐻 said, typing in the password. Midoriya, buddy, you and Chaco are adorable. And with little Yuri, I'm sure you 3 will give everyone diabetes, but you have got to get a new password. Mirio advised. Well, a password should always be something important to you. Tamaki defended him. Yeah, but maybe not. The first thing someone would try if they got his phone. Mirio retorted. Done. 𝐀𝐦 handed the phone back to 𝐬𝐡𝐤. I also put Sue's and Shima's number in there. Thanks. I'll make sure to call them soon, 𝐬𝐡𝐤 said, handing the phone to 𝐸𝐸. You better, 𝐵𝑟𝑖O said in a playful tone. Oh, and 𝐬𝐡𝐤. 𝐬𝐡𝐤 leaned in and whispered into the hero's ear. Have you had any problems with you know what? At normal 100%. No, but the gear you gave me for past 100% is worse for wear. Since you were gone for so long no one was here to give it regular maintenance, 𝐵𝑟𝑖O explained. Sorry, 𝐬𝐡𝐤 apologized. It's not your fault, 𝐵𝑟𝑖O said. Tamaki looked at his watch and frowned. 𝐵𝑟𝑖O, we need to go. Our breaks are up. Oh, you're right, 𝐵𝑟𝑖O said. Well, I'll stop by and leave the gear at a later time. Okay, I should have it repaired the next day, 𝐬𝐡𝐤 told him. 𝐵𝑟𝑖O nodded, and then took off, flying up into the air before passing through the ceiling. Tamaki grew wings and flew out the window, with 𝐀𝐦 following suit while waving goodbye. Why don't they use the door? 𝐸𝐸 asked. Because no one who can fly or phase through walls ever uses a door, 𝐬𝐡𝐤 told her. A few minutes later, 𝐬𝐡𝐤 and 𝐸𝐸 once again had gotten in position. Okay, 16% should do it. 𝐬𝐡𝐤 took a deep breath. Go. The repulsors flared to life and lifted 𝐬𝐡𝐤 into the air. 𝐬𝐡𝐤 got a grip of his weight and feeling of moving through the air before he started moving through the air. 𝐸𝐸 watched in amazement as 𝐬𝐡𝐤 flew through the air with relative ease. I'm flying. I'm really flying. A smile made its way onto 𝐬𝐡𝐤's face. He had done it. He could fly. He flew around for a few more minutes, doing some tricks and spins the best he could to test his control before after a while, making a rough landing back to where he started. It worked. 𝐬𝐡𝐤 stuttered in amazement. It actually worked. The proto-flight thrusters are a success. Does that mean we're done? 𝐸𝐸 asked, her stomach growling. I'm hungry. Of course we can, 𝐸𝐸. Just get me the screwdriver so I can get these off first, 𝐬𝐡𝐤 said. A week and a half later. All right. 𝐬𝐡𝐤 finished tinkering with the helmet, which was on 𝐸𝐸's head. Now turn it on and read me the results. 𝐸𝐸 nodded inside the helmet. HUD on. The HUD lit up and 𝐸𝐸 was bombarded with holograms and screens displaying all sorts of information. It's a lot, 𝐸𝐸 said, trying to look at everything at once. Just read off one thing at a time, 𝐬𝐡𝐤 told her, and make sure to look at me. Oh, okay. 𝐸𝐸 looked directly at 𝐬𝐡𝐤 as the HUD displayed all sorts of info. Name, 𝐬𝐡𝐤 Midoriya. Notable physical mutations, none. Energy output, none. Status, civilian. No technology or weapons located. 𝐸𝐸 continued to read off statistics. All the while 𝐬𝐡𝐤 looked at her proudly, his pride coming from both his work on the HUD and 𝐸𝐸's reading ability. Public education was a non-option for 𝐸𝐸, seeing as she was horribly afraid of going outside, leaving 𝐬𝐡𝐤 and 𝐴CHAKO, and meeting new people. With that in mind, 𝐬𝐡𝐤 had taken to personally teaching her things himself. 𝐸𝐸, while admittedly not knowing much at first due to living most of her life in captivity, was an avid learner and absorbed information like a sponge. Their lesions typically lasted for about 3 to 4 hours, although if the two of them were super absorbed in their sessions they might go on the entire day. And helmet integrity 100%. 𝐸𝐸 finished. Did I say it right? Perfectly, 𝐬𝐡𝐤 responded. Well, it was kind of a lie. She did say a few of the bigger words incorrectly, but she didn't need to worry about that right now. 𝐬𝐡𝐤 had made several modifications to the armor by now, fine-tuning the replacers for greater control while flying, increasing the general power and durability of the armor, greatly improving the power consumption rate. He had even made improvements to the arc reactor. Now that he had better materials and was under better circumstances, he was able to craft a new and improved version. This one was more powerful and generally ran better than the last one. 𝐬𝐡𝐤 took the helmet off her head. It was a good thing the helmet was too big for her, otherwise her horn would have made it an issue. I think you deserve some candy apples. 𝐬𝐡𝐤 smiled when he saw 𝐸𝐸's eyes widen and her mouth water. I'll go get the apple. You can watch some TV while I'm gone. 𝐬𝐡𝐤 picked up the remote and turned on the lab TV. It's a disaster at the Hoth shopping district. A villain is rampaging through the streets and the heroes are having difficulties stopping him, shouted a newswoman. 𝐬𝐡𝐤's attention shifted to the screen as he observed the fight going on. Most of the district was frozen over by a villain 𝐬𝐡𝐤 recognized. Blizzard. He was a low-threat villain that had managed to escape custody a while ago. He was currently fighting Ingenium, with 𝗵𝘃𝗄 trying to avoid going to sleep, and Ground Zero had already been frozen. Blizzard's quirk isn't powerful enough to do something like this. Kaken should have taken him out immediately even if it was a surprise attack. This doesn't make any sense. 𝐬𝐡𝐤 looked closer at the screen to see if there was something he was missing, and what he saw made his blood boil. It was his gauntlets, his 𝐓𝐡𝐢 gauntlets. They were being used to enhance and focus his icy blast to significantly increase their power. He knew villains were using his tech to hurt people. He had been told that 𝐴CHAKO had even already caught a very small amount of the perpetrators. But seeing the villain fight heroes with his gear, seeing him hurt people with his gear, the gear he had spent weeks perfecting, the gear that 𝐴CHAKO had spent days marketing, Izuku clenched his fist and grit his teeth as he glared angrily at the screen. Damn it, at this rate, 𝐸𝐸 is going to lose, or more people are gonna get hurt. Izuku slammed his fist into the desk before he looked at the disc. Ochako should have given Tsu some of the discs, but she's way too out of it because of the cold, Izuku realized, and I don't know when or if any of the others are gonna get there. He felt powerless again. Back then the feeling of powerlessness would send Izuku into a depression, making him sad and despondent. But now he felt angry, enraged at his own helplessness. If only he could just get the disc to them. Or better yet, use the desk on the villain himself. It was his mess after all. Then, suddenly everything became clear, and he knew what he had to do. 𝐀𝐦, Izuku shouted as he ran over to the center of his lab, carrying the helmet. 𝐀𝐦 barged into the lab. What is it, sir? Take care of 𝐸𝐸, and get her candy apple, Izuku ordered him as he stood in a circle in the center of his lab. And what are you going to do, sir? 𝐀𝐦 asked. Simple. Izuku placed the helmet on his head. Engage. Suddenly, the floor and ceiling opened up, and arms carrying parts of his armor sprung up. The arms attached the armor to his body. The armor pieces locked together, sealing him inside it, until Izuku was inside the Iron Man armor, Mark LL. It was painted mainly green with black and white highlights here and there. The arc reactor flared to life, and the armor powered up. I'm going to clean up my mess, Izuku told him. Meanwhile, in the Hoth district, Ida was running out of steam. He had been fighting the villain for much longer than he would have liked, but he wasn't able to get close. And what's worse is that now he had to carry and protect Usui from the blast of cold, all while making sure to watch his step so he didn't slip on the ice. You can't dodge forever, hero, Blizzard shouted at him, shooting 2 blasts, one in front of Ida and one where he currently was. Ida took a hard left and started running up the iced wall, using the immense speed and power of his legs to do so. I need to get Tsu to safety. Ida aimed to run to the top of the building to place Tsu away from the fight. However, Blizzard wasn't keen on letting this happen, and he shot a blast right at where Ida was running. The blast hit just above Ida's position, causing massive chunks of ice to appear and toss Ida and Usui off the building. Tsu, the currently hibernating frog girl, was flung from his arms, as the two of them plummeted to their certain demise divided by. Ida closed his eyes and readied himself for death. I'm sorry, Tensei. I was not worthy of the mantle and 𝐸𝐸. The two got closer and closer to the ground until Izuku swooped in and grabbed the two of them, rocketing them back into the sky. Phew, just in time. Izuku breathed a sigh of relief. Who are you? Ida had never seen this hero before, so either this was a new hero or a vigilante. Not important, shouted Izuku's voice through the suit's speaker. He flew to the top of the building and tossed Ida and Tsu on the roof. You stay here and guard her, Izuku told him. I'm going to take him down. Without another word, Izuku turned around and rocketed right at Blizzard. Blizzard panicked. Seeing the new enemy's high speed, he fired off 2 ice blasts right at him. 50% power, repulsor beam, Izuku shouted as he put his hands out in front of him and fired 2 steady beams. The beams smashed through the ice blast, destroying them before hitting Blizzard directly, knocking him through one of the buildings he'd iced over. Izuku stopped the beams and landed on the icy street before walking towards Blizzard. Oh, the villain was stunned from the attack, leaving him open. Izuku walked towards him and threw out 2 of his tech-disabling discs right at the gauntlet. The disc latched onto the gauntlets, causing them to crackle with electricity, malfunctioning before shutting down. What? Blizzard panicked as he saw his stolen tech was no longer operational. Not so tough without your stolen technology, are you? Izuku dashed towards the villain with alarming speed and grabbed him by his blue and white costume. The villain raised his arm to try and freeze Izuku, but Izuku caught his arm and squeezed it. Blizzard shouted. He felt his bones crack. Izuku threw the villain out of the building and back onto the street for the public to see. Gah! The wind was knocked out of the villain as his back landed on the cold hard ice. Izuku hovered over to Blizzard, who was attempting to pick himself back up, and placed his foot on his back, forcing him to the ground. This is mine, Izuku growled as he ripped the EFE gauntlet off the man's left arm, before crushing it with his other foot. And this is mine. Izuku ripped the other gauntlet off him and crushed it in his hand, turning it into scrap metal before tossing it into the ground. You're going away for a long, long time, Izuku told him, before aiming his repulsor at his head and firing, knocking him out. The fight was over. Ida looked down with wide eyes, while the civilians who had stayed and the new people started to cheer. He did it. He took him down in no time. Who is this guy? Izuku ignored them and looked at the frozen ground. 0. Repulsor beam, 10%. Izuku pointed his palm at the ice he was encased in and fired off a beam of energy. The beam didn't break the ice immediately. Rather, it started melting it, making cracks appear more and more in the ice until, crack, the ice broke apart. Bakugo fell to the floor, unconscious from being in the ice. Okay. Now I only have one more thing to do. Izuku turned around and walked towards the horde of news people that were starting to gather. 𝐬𝐡𝐚𝐭 stood in front of the cameras as reports shouted questions at him. Then he spoke. "Disengage helmet," he said. Several parts shifted and unlocked until finally the helmet was loose enough for 𝐬𝐡𝐭 to take off. Everyone gasped, instantly recognizing the face of one of the richest people in the world. "My name is 𝐬𝐡𝐭 𝐍𝐻𝐬 𝐈𝐬 said, with both fury and determination burning in his eyes. "As many of you know, I am the owner of 𝐬𝐻𝐬 Industries, one of the biggest support companies in the world. I started creating support gear and other pieces of technology to help people, to help the heroes who risk their lives to protect us. However, for some time now my tech has been being stolen and being sold to villains. Even more, people gasped as 𝐬𝐡𝐭 pointed to the destroyed gauntlets. The technology I spent years developing to help and protect people is now being used to hurt them. 𝐬𝐡𝐭 shouted in anger. "But I won't have it. I just stand by and let other people clean up my mess. Me and my wife are going to find the people responsible for stealing our tech and put them away for good. And to all the villains who already have my gear." 𝐬𝐡𝐭 blasted the destroyed gauntlets, ruining them even further. "I'm coming for you," 𝐬𝐡𝐭 threatened. The crowd broke out into murmurs as people said out loud their varying opinions on the shocking revelations that were just dropped on them. Well, that's all well and good, but first, 𝐬𝐡𝐭 turned around and saw several policemen with their weapons raised at him. "You're under arrest for vigilantism," the cop finished. "Oh, I forgot about that." 𝐬𝐡𝐭 sat, nervously waiting in the police interrogation room. His armor was of course confiscated and he was in cuffs, waiting for someone to come in. He wasn't scared of legal action. He knew he was more than rich enough to get out of any serious consequences, something he had very mixed feelings about. No, what terrified him was what his wife was going to do to him. "𝐻𝐡𝐭 is going to kill me," 𝐬𝐡𝐭 dreaded. "Well, at least I have time to figure out what I'm going to say. Whatever it is probably isn't going to get me out of trouble, but maybe I can." The door opened, and instead of a lawyer, the person who walked in was none other than 𝐻𝐡𝐭 herself, with a lawyer and a bodyguard behind her and a blank, unreadable expression on her face that was somehow scarier than what he expected. "She's already here," 𝐬𝐡𝐭 screamed in his head, trying and failing not to show his fear on his face. "Hey, dear." To his credit, 𝐬𝐡𝐭 only stuttered once saying that. Shush," 𝐻𝐡𝐭 urged him. "We'll talk later." 𝐬𝐡𝐭 wisely decided to shut his mouth. The police chief walked in. This is a police interrogation room. You can't just walk in. Your husband has committed no crime." 𝐻𝐡𝐭 interrupted him before turning to the lawyer. "Bengoshi, tell him. Vigilantism is legally defined as the act of an individual using their quirk to cause harm to a criminal or villain without said individual having ownership of some form of hero license." The lawyer explained. "As 𝐬𝐡𝐭 𝐍𝐻𝐬 is quirkless, he is incapable of committing the crime he is accused of. The version of vigilantism you're thinking of has been outdated for the last few decades and has no legal power behind it as of now." Both the police chiefs and 𝐬𝐡𝐭's eyes widened after hearing that. "I never thought about that. I guess that's one advantage of being quirkless." Somehow that felt wrong to think in 𝐬𝐡𝐭's mind. So he can just run around committing vigilantism because of some legal loophole. That can't be right, the chief said, going through all the legal knowledge in his head to try and find a rebuttal. "As I said, he's incapable of committing vigilantism. Unless All for One or 𝗃𝗓𝗏 Shigaraki were to come back to life and give him a quirk, he can't be charged with vigilantism. Period." Bengoshi pushed up his glasses. "He can go around stopping villains and criminals in an armored suit, but that's all completely legal. But trust me, I have a strong feeling that's going to stop after today," 𝐻𝐡𝐭 added in a tone that made 𝐬𝐡𝐭 turn pale. The police chief looked at 𝐬𝐡𝐭, and then at 𝐻𝐡𝐭 and the lawyer. After a few moments of thinking, he sighed. "Well, I suppose I'll go start the process for his release." "Oh no, we're taking him now," 𝐻𝐡𝐭 said. There is a process that we have to." The poor Dogman didn't get to finish before 𝐻𝐡𝐭 cut him off. "I don't think you understand the situation you're in," she said in a very serious tone. "Are you aware of how bad quirk discrimination looks to the public?" "Quirk discrimination?" the police chief growled, seeing exactly where this was going. It was an obvious mistake. Anyone would think I'm not in the mood to play today, so I'm just going to get to the point." 𝐻𝐡𝐭 looked at the chief like he was a minor nuisance, something that was annoying her more than anything else. "We are some of the richest and most powerful people in Japan, in charge of helping the legal system. And mean the heroes, you know, the important people, the ones who let you babysit the villains they catch before they escort them to jail. If we say that you arrested my husband because he was quirkless, how do you think that's going to go for you and your men? Isn't that a bit moo?" 𝐬𝐡𝐭 tried to protest, but 𝐻𝐡𝐭 gave him a look and shut him down instantly. The chief grit his teeth. There was one famous rule about dealing with 𝐬𝐻𝐬 Industries. Don't fuck with 𝐻𝐡𝐭 𝐬𝐻𝐬. Many people have been ruined financially because they messed with either the company, her money, or her husband. Fine, the chief was a stickler for rules. But he also didn't want his men to lose their jobs for something like this. "I'll get the paperwork and act like he got released after the fact and not before." 𝐻𝐡𝐭 gave him a polite, but entirely empty smile. Thank you. I'm normally much kinder than this, but I'm in a terrible mood today. With that, 𝐻𝐡𝐭 walked into the interrogation room. Rather than asking him to get up, 𝐻𝐡𝐭 simply tapped his head, making him float up before grabbing him and dragging him by his shirt. I'm so screwed. Izuku gulped. The police chief was about to tell her not to use her quirk here, but his men were giving him a look telling him he shouldn't even bother. The chief sighed. He hated rich people. 𝐻𝐡𝐭, the lawyer, and the bodyguard walked out of the station without any issue. Fortunately, the press hadn't arrived yet as no one had managed to leak that Izuku was being released right now. Thank you for your work, Bengoshi. You are dismissed, 𝐻𝐡𝐭 told the lawyer, who bowed as he split off from the group. 𝐻𝐡𝐭 walked up to the limo that was waiting for them, opened the door, and lightly pushed Izuku inside. Once she got inside herself, she gently let Izuku down on the seat before releasing her quirk and returning Izuku's gravity to him. The bodyguard jumped in the driver's seat. I'm assuming you want some privacy for your talk, boss. No, we'll be having that talk at home, 𝐻𝐡𝐭 said. A car ride full of tension and silence. Of boy, how fun. Later at Midoriya's manor. Izuku was almost shaking as he sat on his bed. 𝐻𝐡𝐭 had been strangely, eerily calm this entire time, and once they got home she didn't start yelling at him or scolding him, she just told him to take a shower, and after he got out, she took one as well. Somehow her lack of reaction to this situation was more alarming than her being angry about it. Speaking of which, 𝐻𝐡𝐭 walked out of the shower wearing only her towel, with a sweet, at ease smile that would be welcome in any other situation but this one. I feel so much better now. 𝐻𝐡𝐭 walked over to their tea machine and started making tea. More unnerving silence filled the room, and Izuku waited for her to start scolding him at any moment. Eri was being tended to by their second most capable bodyguard, Minaiteki, and was far enough that she wouldn't hear any yelling, meaning 𝐻𝐡𝐭 could be as loud as she wanted. After a few minutes of nothing, 𝐻𝐡𝐭 finished making the tea and carried the 2 cups of tea over to the bed, using her quirk to make it easier on herself. You look like you need this, 𝐻𝐡𝐭 said, giving him the gentle smile he loved so much while pushing the floating tea to him. Tea, thanks. Izuku gave a shaky, nervous smile in return. It was a relaxing environment, drinking calming tea with his wife on the edge of the bed. The only sound coming from the gentle wind outside rustling the trees, and the only light coming from the moon and the stars outside their window. On any other night, it would have made Izuku feel at ease, but tonight it made him feel confused and paranoid, although the tea did help take the edge off the latter feeling. He'd seen his wife use various physiological tactics on their competitors and other enemies, but for the life of him he couldn't figure out her angle here. He could only sit and wait for her to finally talk. Fortunately, that didn't take much longer to happen. I'm not angry, 𝐻𝐡𝐭 said, finally addressing the elephant in the room. What? This only confused Izuku even more. You're not. Okay, that's a lie, I'm furious, 𝐻𝐡𝐭 answered in a very upset tone, making Izuku flinch. But not at you. I'm mad at myself. At yourself. Izuku was so lost. Yes, at myself. Because I should have seen this coming, 𝐻𝐡𝐭 said, seemingly scolding herself. You just got back after being held captive for almost a year, and you had to break yourself out. Of course, you would do something this crazy. I should have gotten you to a therapist the minute you came back. Izuku didn't know how to feel. On one hand, she thought he was crazy, something he didn't like one bit, and he didn't like the idea of seeing a therapist either. He should be strong enough that he didn't need one. But on the other hand, 𝐻𝐡𝐭 was blaming herself about something that was definitely not her fault, and that made him want to say that everything was his fault and that she was right and he needed to go to therapy. In the end, he said nothing, and let 𝐻𝐡𝐭 continue. I can't be mad at you for this, Izuku. I mean, I can, but that's not fair to you, 𝐻𝐡𝐭 decided. But you are going to a therapist. Luckily, I've been looking around for one for years, so it shouldn't take me too long to book an appointment. Shouldn't I have a say in this? Izuku finally spoke up. You did. Then you used our money to make high-tech battle armor, and then decided to become a vigilante, 𝐻𝐡𝐭 snapped in a decisively less calm voice. A small part of Izuku wanted to point out that it legally wasn't vigilantism, but this wasn't a courtroom. That fact had no power here. You need help, Izuku. 𝐻𝐡𝐭 gave him a pleading look, throwing her tea aside and letting it float, before grabbing his shoulders and making him look at her face. You've always needed help. People hurt you. Life hurt you. And I can't help you by myself. More silence followed that statement, tears swimming in 𝐻𝐡𝐭's eyes, making Izuku cry along with her. I've been selfish, 𝐻𝐡𝐭 tearfully admitted. I knew that you should have gotten help, but you wouldn't let anyone put me in. And I liked being the center of your world. I thought I could help you by myself, but I'm not a psychologist. Izuku looked on in sadness as 𝐻𝐡𝐭 cried. He hated it. He knew that she had been wanting him to see a therapist for a while, like, almost as long as they've known each other. But she rarely pushed the matter. But if this is how much it's been bothering her, I keep telling you you're not weak. You're not weak for needing help. You're not weak for being quirkless. You're not weak for not being a pro hero. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 shouted. When are you gonna get it through your stupid, genius brain? 𝐻𝐚𝐭. 𝐬𝐡𝐾 kept thinking over her words. Now more than ever, the two of them were silent for a while. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 eventually managed to calm herself and dry her tears. Okay, 𝐬𝐡𝐾 said. I'll do it. I didn't know I was causing you so much pain. I'm sorry. You're darn right, you're sorry. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 sniffed. I love you, you idiot. Do you know how much it hurts to know you're not okay? It hurts Tamaki too. And Mirio. They just don't know how to ask you about it. Well, I can't keep hurting you. I'd never forgive myself. 𝐬𝐡𝐾 said. I'll go to therapy. But, 𝐻𝐚𝐭 raised an eyebrow. But I need to keep being Iron Man. 𝐬𝐡𝐾 said. His tone was resolute, and his expression was strong. All trace of the fear and hesitation was seemingly gone. Absolutely not, was 𝐻𝐚𝐭's immediate answer. 𝐬𝐡𝐾, you could die. Yes, but that's what I always wanted to do anyway. 𝐬𝐡𝐾's eyes widened as he realized what he just said. Risk my life for others. That's what I meant. I didn't mean I wanted to die. 𝐬𝐡𝐾. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 rubbed her temples in irritation. I just need to get back my stolen tech, and 𝐬𝐡𝐾 was cut off. No, it's not about the tech. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 glared at him and poked his chest in an accusatory fashion. You know what this is about. You want to be a pro hero. You've always wanted to be one, and when you couldn't, it crushed you, and you never let it go. You carried it all the way with you up till now. Every day you watch the pros do their work, and it kills you. It kills you because you want to be right there with them. Well, you can't. You're not a pro hero. You're Izuku Midoriya, one of the richest men in the fucking world, married with a beautiful, precious daughter, and the man who makes the gear the fucking pros use to save people. You're Iri's hero. You're my hero. Why can't that be enough? 𝐻𝐚𝐭 stopped for a moment to catch her breath. We were both at our lowest we met. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 calmed slightly. We both wanted to be heroes, but we never got to because of some rotten luck. Then we met. I was in the business course, you were in the support course, and I saw how amazing you were at creating support gear, and how not amazing you were with people. So we decided to work together. You'd make the product and I would do all the business stuff. We made money. We fell in love. We created the most powerful support company out there. I got over not being a hero. I wanted to make money to support my parents and to help some people on the way. Thanks to you, I got to do both those things. Why can't you just move on? 𝐬𝐡𝐾 paused for a few moments. He got up and looked out the window. Maybe, 𝐬𝐡𝐾 said. Maybe I could move on. You're right about a lot of what you said, but you're wrong about one thing. It is the tech. Maybe I could move on. Maybe if I just went to therapy like you've been telling me, I could get over my problems and live this wonderful life that I know I have without any regrets. But they're using my gear. The things I made to help people, to save people. They're using it to hurt people, to steal from people, to kill people. And I can't just sit back and let that happen. It's not enough to just make those discs and try to weed out the people stealing them. I have to stop them myself. 𝐬𝐡𝐾 turned his head and looked 𝐻𝐚𝐭 in the eyes. It's not something I want to do. It's something I need to do. And what about us? 𝐻𝐚𝐭 asked, standing up and walking over to him. If the worst happens, how do I tell Iri that her daddy is dead again? 𝐬𝐡𝐾 didn't answer for a moment, but he also didn't look away. I don't know, but I can't stop myself. I wish I could promise you that I wouldn't do this, but I know that would just be a lie. I need to help with this, or I won't be able to live with myself. There was another pause, as both of them just looked down. I'm sorry I keep hurting you. 𝐬𝐡𝐾 started crying again. If you want to leave, he was cut off by 𝐻𝐚𝐭, wrapping her arms around his shoulders and her lips around his own, silencing him with a kiss. 𝐬𝐡𝐾 was shocked, his face reddened and his eyes nearly popped out of his head. It ended quickly, and 𝐻𝐚𝐭 gave a tired giggle. I love you. Do you know why? It's not just because you're smart, or because you're cute as heck, or even because you made me filthy stinking rich. It's because of this. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 pointed at his heart. The stupid, wonderful thing that won't let you not do the right thing. That won't rest until you've either helped someone or died trying. That spontaneously pulls willpower out of nowhere and makes you the most stubborn, unyielding man alive. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 continued. It's like 1 minute you're the most adorable cinnamon roll, too good for this world, and the next you're an unstoppable force of good that won't let anything get in his way. 𝐬𝐡𝐾 blushed. Why, you're exaggerate. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 pulled 𝐬𝐡𝐾 closer to her. I promised that I would always be there for you, no matter what stupid idea you had or what rash thing you did, and I'm not going to break that vow. Ever. 𝐬𝐡𝐾 looked at her in befuddlement for a moment, before a big, stupid grin broke out on his face and happy tears streamed down his face. I'm so greedy. I have the best wife in the world and I still can't be satisfied and just do what she tells me. I know, such a greedy boy. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 teased. But I'm even greedier. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 touched 𝐬𝐡𝐾, activating her quirk on him again, before pulling him away to the door that led to the special room. Before I let you expose yourself to the rest of the world, I need to remind you who you belong to at the end of the day, 𝐻𝐚𝐭 said seductively, opening the door to the room. I'm a greedy girl after all. As Izuku was tossed into the special room, he had a strong feeling there would be no sleeping tonight for either of them. 2 days later, the press was gathered around a podium in front of the Midoriya Industries main building. On the stage were many men in suits, 𝐀𝐦 and 𝐻𝐡𝐚𝐭, but those weren't who the press were here to see today. After a few minutes, Izuku Midoriya stepped up on the podium. Instantly, the press erupted into an orgy of questions, being spat out left and right and all so loud that they drowned each other out, turning it into just a sea of noise. Izuku went on the microphone and spoke. Everyone please quiet down. I'll be answering questions after I give a short speech, so please hold all questions till the end. After a few short minutes, the crowd quieted down. Thank you, Izuku said. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes so he could momentarily forget that a large crowd of people was there. I can do this. 𝐻𝐡𝐭 believes in you. A lot has happened to me this year, Izuku said. Firstly, I was kidnapped by the Yakuza, and while that was an extremely stressful and unpleasant situation for both myself and my loved ones, I'm almost glad it happened. That comment caused quite a few people to gasp and murmurs broke out among the crowd. And that's because of 2 things. Izuku elaborated. Firstly, while I was there I was being held with another one of the Yakuza's prisoners, a little girl named Eri. After we escaped, I adopted her as my daughter. Suddenly the crowd broke out once more, people asking questions, people talked to other people and people just talking to themselves. They were nearly louder than they were at the beginning. Please quiet down. Izuku urged them once again. Any questions about Eri can be asked at the end with the rest of them. Eri will not be making a public appearance anytime soon, however. After quite a while, the crowd simmered down once more. The second reason is because of what they told me. Izuku continued. Apparently my company's tech has been being sold on the black market to villains. Again the crowd started getting louder, but surprisingly it didn't last very long. I guess it's because I revealed that earlier, Izuku thought. The Yakuza wanted me to build gear and weapons for them directly, Izuku explained. I had no choice but to comply at first. I waited for the heroes to come save me while biding my time building mediocre gear for the Yakuza and stalling as much as I could. But the leader of the Yakuza, 𝗓𝗡, knew that I was stalling, waiting for the heroes, and revealed to me that he had the heroes around the area in his pocket. A few gasps and some outrage broke out in the crowd, but it calmed quickly enough. After that, I knew I couldn't wait for heroes to come save us, Izuku said. So I made a plan, and I made some armor, and I waited for the right time. The Yakuza started fighting each other and I took the opportunity to escape with Eri. Some more murmurs came from the crowd before they became silent. After I was freed and took some time to recover, I immediately got to work with 𝐻𝐡𝐭 about stopping the theft of our technology. Izuku said, for now, no new products will be developed by Midoriya Industries, and the amount of our support gear our company is distributing will be lowered. These changes have already been put into effect and will stay in effect until we can completely put a stop to these thefts. This caused another loud uproar in the crowd, as people talked about the huge financial impact this would have on the company. Yes, this will cause a large financial dip from the company, but for my workers, you don't have to worry. The only people getting fired are those who have been found to have aided and are directly responsible for the theft and illegal and sale of my technology, Izuku said to reassure his own employees. All workers who will be lacking work due to the cutting back of product development and distribution will basically be on paid vacation. We are one of the most financially well-off companies in the world. We can afford to do this for our workers who have put so much effort into helping us get to this point. It's true, for most other support companies this would be near corporate suicide. With both the bad press of your tech being used by villains and all the money you would lose both by lowering the number of products you sell and paying a bunch of workers to literally do nothing, it was just a dumb idea all around. However, with the general good press they'd always had before this, the fact that they were friends with some of the top heroes around, and the fact that their products were just generally much better than any of their competitors, I would like to say, this will only be affecting our support gear branch, Izuku said. All other branches of Midoriya Industries will be mostly unaffected. However, for the sake of security, we are surveilling all branches more heavily. While Midoriya Industries primarily made support gear, they had branched out over time, now producing tech that helped people with troublesome quirks get through life, tech that helped the disabled, and eventually, they just expanded out into all types of technology, from things that improved quality of life to space exploration technology. Although Izuku didn't really develop much for those branches after a while, sticking to main support gear while the other researchers they hired did work on those. Now lastly, there is one more thing that I must address. Izuku took a second to ready himself. Yes, I did indeed get in an armored suit, take down a villain, and then state that I was going to personally hunt down any villains using my technology and take them down myself. And yes, I am still going to do that. The crowd exploded, as many people started yelling out comments at him while others yelled out questions. I will and now be answering questions, 𝐬𝐻𝐻 said. Please raise your hands and I will call you out. The press enthusiastically raised their hands. You, 𝐬𝐻𝐻 pointed out a fish-headed reporter. Are you saying that you're going to be actively committing vigilantism? The reporter asked. And how did you get out of vigilantism charges in the first place? Vigilantism is defined as an unlicensed use of a quirk to harm a villain or criminal, 𝐬𝐻𝐻 explained. As I don't have a quirk, I am immune to such charges. Next question. As per 𝐴𝐻𝐸𝐽's instructions, he had to move quickly from question to question, never allowing one reporter to take control of the conference. He pointed out another reporter. Do you think it's right to exploit a legal loophole for your own benefit and ignore the reason the law was put into place? The reporter asked. 𝐬𝐻𝐻 winced. Aye. Everything I am doing is perfectly legal. I have no misgivings about going through with my mission. Next question. So you're not a hero, not a vigilante. What exactly do you consider yourself? A reporter asked. 𝐬𝐻𝐻 thought about that question. It was not one he was anticipating, so he was a bit confused about how to answer it. After a few moments, 𝐬𝐻𝐻 spoke. I don't think we can really give me an official title. After all, this kind of thing has never been done before. But if you want something to call me. 𝐬𝐻𝐻 paused. I am Iron Man. In a dilapidated and abandoned apartment building, 7 criminals were in the middle of a sale. And the product being sold, Midoriya Industries hardware. Why'd the price go up? It's almost twice as fucking much as it was last time. One of the buyers asked, clearly not happy about the increase in price. Hey, calm the fuck down. One of the sellers said, ever since that prick Overhaul snitched on us and told Midoriya what was going on, he's made a lot fucking harder to sneak this stuff out. Less supply, more demand. One of the other sellers summarized. Don't help that the fucker is going around in a goddamn suit of armor hunting down any fucker with his tech. The third seller said, bullshit, that rich fuck probably can't fight his way out of a paper bag. The buyer who said that leaned up against the wall and tried to light a cigarette with fire that came out of his finger. I bet that bastard won't last another day before some villain worth his salt kills him. I could probably do it. Crash. Suddenly 𝐬𝐻𝐻's armored arms smashed through the wall the villain was standing behind and grabbed him, before pulling him through the wall and throwing him through another wall. Shit, he's here. 𝐬𝐻𝐻's targeting system went to work. And before the villains could recover from the shock of 𝐬𝐻𝐻's arrival, he had already raised his arm, firing 3 blasts that hit the villains head on, sending them flying back and into unconsciousness. One of the villains tried to use his quirk, spitting at 𝐬𝐻𝐻. Boom! The saliva landed on 𝐬𝐻𝐻's chest plate and immediately exploded, creating a small amount of smoke that covered his upper body. Did I get him? The villain asked. In response to that question, 𝐬𝐻𝐻 walked forward through the smoke, barely even a scratch on his armor. Aw shit, the villain said. He tried to get himself ready to spit again. But 𝐬𝐻𝐻 suddenly rushed forward at astonishing speeds and grabbed him by the throat. The other 2 villains got out their guns and fired at 𝐬𝐻𝐻. However, it predictably did nothing to him as the bullets simply bounced off his armor. 𝐬𝐻𝐻 backhanded the guy to his right, sending him flying, before punching the other guy in the face, sending him through a wall. With only one goon conscious and gasping for breath in his grip, 𝐬𝐻𝐻 decided it was time to get some answers. 𝐬𝐻𝐻 let him go, and the goon fell on his knees gasping for air. Where did you get these? 𝐬𝐻𝐻 pointed to the crate full of his tech. In response, the villain tried to use his quirk, but before he could spit at him, 𝐬𝐻𝐻 light kicked him in the face, causing him to fly back and smash his head against a wall. The villain cried out in pain. Both his nose and head were now bleeding. Shit, you fuck. Just tell me where you got them and we can get you to a hospital, 𝐬𝐻𝐻 told him. Fuck off, I'm not telling you shit, the thug said, before again trying to use his quirk. 𝐬𝐻𝐻 blasted the thug with a repulsor blast, knocking him out. He sighed. None of them are talking. Maybe I need to ask 𝐀𝐦 for some advice on interrogation. Outside of the suit, there were a few things that 𝐴𝐻𝐸𝐽 said he had to do if he wanted to keep being Iron Man. One of them was that she had unrestricted access to his helmet's camera feed, although 𝐬𝐻𝐻 would have done that anyway. And if she saw him talking to Deku right now, oh boy, it would not be pretty. Hero incoming. Sun Eater. 𝐬𝐻𝐻 sighed. He had a feeling he knew what Tamaki wanted to talk about, and it was not a conversation he was looking forward to. After a few moments, Tamaki walked into the room, entering through the hole 𝐬𝐻𝐻 had made in the wall. You know you're going to have to pay for this, right? Tamaki asked. I bought the building the second I saw them walking into it, 𝐬𝐻𝐻 explained. I'm planning on tearing it down, but I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. Maybe a new office for my legal team. They've been working overtime lately. 𝐬𝐻𝐻. Tamaki tried to speak up. Oh, looks like the police have found a warehouse full of my stolen tech and are engaging with a firefight with the villains inside. 𝐬𝐻𝐻 couldn't believe his luck. I gotta go, let's talk later, bye. Tamaki tried to say something, but 𝐬𝐻𝐻 simply charged through the wall and flew away. The hero sighed, before growing wings and following the sea. A few minutes later at the warehouse. When Tamaki caught up to Izuku, he found him flying above the crime scene in question, staring down at the police and criminals engaged in a firefight. He felt conflicted. It was obvious that Izuku was analyzing the situation, which was good. Given what he knew of Izuku, he expected him to come flying in head first to try and save as many people as possible. Izuku was a smart man. That much was obvious, but he was incredibly passionate about saving people and was rather careless when it came to his own safety. And while it wasn't a bad thing to want to save people, that kind of recklessness could often make things worse, so he was glad that his friend managed to restrain himself. On the other hand, he still really didn't have any business being here. Sure, he had that fancy suit, but power was not all it took to be a hero, and Izuku had none of the training required to be a pro hero. But he did manage to take down the Yakuza, even if he had help. And Blizzard too. Maybe I should give him a chance, Tamaki thought. I don't think I would be able to convince him to go away right now. With his mind made up, he flew next to Izuku. What's the situation? 4 police cars are blocking the way out. 7 policemen are still fighting and 1 is injured and hiding behind the car. A total of 30 hostiles in total, with 11 outside firing at the police and the rest are inside loading up a truck with as much tech they can fit in there. They've got 1 guy strapped to the front of the truck. I think they're going to try and use his quirk to break through the police barricade. Izuku summarized. You take the people outside. I'll stop the truck, Tamaki said, ready to start fighting. No need. Compartments opened up on Izuku's shoulders, and missiles launched out of them towards the villains outside. Boom, 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 boom. WHAAH. The rockets crashed into the villains, hitting their marks and sending the shooters flying. Let's go get that truck, Izuku said before flying towards the warehouse. Tamaki followed suit and quickly looked for an entrance other than the front door. After all, it might be trapped and crash. Izuku had already made an entrance by just flying through the concrete wall. The armored billionaire opened fire with his repulsor blast, first striking the truck's wheels, making sure it wasn't going anywhere. Crap, he hit the truck, one of the thugs said. Tamaki flew in and grabbed a villain with his tentacles, before swinging him around to hit some more of the goons. Izuku started shooting out repulsor blasts at the villains, hitting and knocking most of them out with ease. One of the villains suddenly bulked up and took the repulsor blast head-on, only getting minor burns. The villain charged towards Izuku. Endurance quirk. You got him? Izuku asked Tamaki as he flew into the air to keep from getting attacked. Yeah. Tamaki shot out his tentacles at the villain, which wrapped themselves around his upper body. Ocean's Wrath. Suddenly electricity surged through the tentacles, shocking the villain in their grasp. 𝐻𝐻. The villain shouted out in pain as he was shocked to hell and back. Once he was sure the villain was unconscious, Tamaki stopped his attack and unwrapped his tentacle from around the villain, letting him fall to the floor. Another villain tried to sneak up behind Tamaki while he was seemingly not paying attention. However, Tamaki wasn't in the top 10 heroes for nothing. And when the villain went to punch Tamaki, the hero simply turned his hand into a hard shell and backhanded the villain in the face. Sun Eater decided to watch as Izuku took care of the 3 remaining villains. To be fair, it's not like I'd take long. They were all shooting at him, but it was clear it was a losing battle for them. A few blasts later and all the villains were taken care of. Is that everyone? Tamaki asked. No, there's still the one on the truck pretending to be unconscious. Izuku raised his arm and blasted the last villain. Now that's the last of them. All right, then let's let the police handle the rest, Tamaki advised. I need to tell how are things with 𝐀𝐦 𝐍𝐵? Izuku asked suddenly, desperately to prolong the inevitable conversation they would be having. 𝐀𝐦 𝐍𝐵. Tamaki blushed slightly before shaking his head and refocusing. Izuku, please don't try to change the topic. Wait. Izuku shouted. I have to go to therapy. I have an appointment in 5 minutes and 𝐻𝐡𝐚𝐭 will kill me if I miss it. Sorry, gotta go. Izuku took off, flying through the hole he made and into the sky at max speed. Tamaki sighed. At least he's going to therapy. He wouldn't be able to follow him at that speed. He doubted anyone but Hawks, Ada and Mirio would, meaning that all attempts to talk to him while he was wearing that armor would most likely be met with the same kind of evasion, meaning he would have to talk to him while he was outside the armor. As Tamaki was thinking of the best way to go about that, he suddenly felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. He took it out and found a text message waiting for him. A message from 𝐻𝐡𝐚𝐭. I'm sending this message to all of our friends. I'm sure you're all probably trying to talk to Izuku and he's definitely avoiding you like the plague. I'm having a dinner party at the manor tonight. Be there at 8. We'll all talk. P.S. Izuku doesn't know about this yet. The text read, yeah, that seems about right, Tamaki thought. 𝐻𝐡𝐚𝐭 was typically not one to beat around the bush. If she wanted something done, then she pursued that goal relentlessly and wasted no time doing so. Unless, of course, it was a matter of her personal feelings, in which case she might just put it off for as long as possible. I'll have to get my good clothes. I hope there aren't too many people there, Tamaki nervously thought as he left the scene. Sometime later, Izuku walked into the bedroom. tired as hell. As it turns out, doing hero work was extremely physically demanding, especially when said person had little experience doing such work. Who knew? The moment he reached his bed, he collapsed and fell face first onto his sheets. Oh, 𝐻𝐚𝐭 is going to get mad about me getting sweat all over the sheets. Gosh, maybe I should try going down to the spa for once. Oh, I've never been so happy to be rich. 𝐬𝐻𝐽 groaned. He closed his eyes and slowly drifted off into unconsciousness. A few hours later, 𝐬𝐻𝐽 heard as he started to wake up. 𝐬𝐻𝐽, yep, that's definitely 𝐻𝐚𝐭. My body still hurts. I want to sleep. 𝐬𝐻𝐽 thought. 𝐬𝐻𝐽, wake up. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 said, louder than before. Slowly 𝐬𝐻𝐽 opened his eyes and was met with a sight that swiftly woke him up. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 was dressed up in her casual party wear. The clothes she wore when they had friends over. Expensive, yet comfortable. The white dress only enhanced her already obvious beauty. Of course, 𝐬𝐻𝐽 was always happy to look at 𝐻𝐚𝐭 in that dress. But that did beg the question of why she was in it. Come on, you need to get dressed. She gently nudged him. We're having a dinner party. I invited all our friends over, so no need to get too dressed up. Well, if the dress didn't wake 𝐬𝐻𝐽 up. That certainly did. He jolted up with eyes wide. Dinner party. This was not good. This was very not good. 𝐬𝐻𝐽 was never a fan of parties, even ones that were attended by his friends. He just wasn't good at dealing with people. And this was a party where basically every attendant was very interested in having a conversation with him. A very specific conversation he had been trying to avoid. What? When? Why? 𝐬𝐻𝐽 asked in rapid succession. I started planning it after we agreed to let you keep doing the Iron Man thing, 𝐻𝐚𝐭 explained. I was just waiting for an opening in my schedule. Why didn't you tell me? 𝐬𝐻𝐽 asked, his mind in full panic mode. Because you would have tried to avoid it or argue against it or something like that. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 put her hands on her hips and gave him a scolding look. Like you've been avoiding everyone else for these past few weeks. 𝐬𝐻𝐽 cringed and turned away from 𝐻𝐚𝐭's gaze. I haven't been avoiding everyone, I've just been busy. Oh, don't give me that. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 instantly called out his lie. You didn't want to hear everyone tell you what a bad idea this is, so you've been avoiding all of our friends. Don't think I didn't notice you not picking up anyone's calls or responding to anyone's messages. 𝐬𝐻𝐽 didn't have a defense for that. Listen, these conversations are going to happen. So instead of each one of our friends individually hunting you down and scolding you, we can save everyone some trouble and all come around a table and talk like adults. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 took 𝐬𝐻𝐽's hand, calming and comforting him slightly. And you'll have me and 𝐸𝐻 there to support you. 𝐸𝐻's coming too. 𝐬𝐻𝐽 knew 𝐸𝐻 wasn't good with new people, or people that weren't them in general. So he wasn't sure taking her to a party was the best idea right now. She needs more exposure to people. Good people, 𝐻𝐚𝐭 told him. And if it gets too much for her, then you two can leave and you can put her to sleep. It'll give you a good excuse to leave early too. 𝐬𝐻𝐽 still wasn't sure about that. He was super protective of 𝐸𝐻, and the thought of her being uncomfortable for even a second caused him to want to usher her away and hold her in his arms and tell her that she's safe. She'll be okay. We can't keep her locked up in the house like a princess forever. Eventually, she'll need to go outside and talk to people. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 reassured him. And she's gonna have to get used to these fancy parties if she decides she wants to inherit the company. Do you think she'll want to? 𝐬𝐻𝐽 asked her. Of course, 𝐬𝐻𝐽 and 𝐻𝐚𝐭 would gladly hand over the company to 𝐸𝐻 one day. But that was only if she decided she wanted to become CEO of Midoriya Industries. If she wanted to become something else, anything else, they would support her. If she just wanted to live a peaceful life doing absolutely nothing, they would support her still. It was all up to her. I don't know. We'll see, 𝐻𝐚𝐭 told him. Anyway, their attention will probably be on you for the most part, so she'll probably just sit there and watch us for the most part. Somehow that only barely gave 𝐬𝐻𝐽 in comfort. Now get dressed. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 pulled him up off the bed. Or do you want the katsuden to get cold? Well, at least there would be katsuden. Sometime later, sat around a large dining table in the dining room of Midoriya Manor were a whopping 16 people. Going to you. And being the biggest creators and suppliers of support gear, you tend to make a lot of pro-hero friends. 𝐬𝐻𝐽 and 𝐻𝐴CO were of course sitting close to each other with 𝐸𝐻 right in between them. And right next to 𝐻𝐴CO was 𝐓𝑡𝐢. 𝐓𝑡𝐢 was a friend 𝐻𝐴CO had made back in their first year of UA. They had been grouped together on a project involving both the hero course and the business course, and they had remained friends ever since. Next to 𝐬𝐻𝐽 was Kirishima. 𝐬𝐻𝐽 had been tasked with making support gear for him back when he was at UA, and Kirishima decided to befriend him, mostly out of pity. Mina was sat next to him. She was Kirishima's girlfriend and a friend of 𝐡𝐢, so it had only made sense that she befriend the two of them at some point. Tamaki, Mirio, and Nejire were all sitting next to each other with Tamaki right in between the two of them. Shoto Todoroki was also in attendance. 𝐬𝐻𝐽 had also been assigned to make gear for him as well. The two of them didn't get along at first, and they really didn't get along for a while. But one day, something changed, and the two were suddenly good friends. 𝐻𝐡𝐚𝐭 had kept the reason a secret for the most part, with the sole exception being 𝐴𝐻𝐴𝐭, who he told basically everything. Momo was sat directly next to him, due mainly to 𝐴𝐻𝐴𝐭's and Mina's insistence. Momo had actually met them due to business. She had seen great potential in Izuku's gear and invested in them. This led to them eventually becoming close friends, mainly due to 𝐴𝐻𝐴𝐭 wanting to secure a business relationship. 𝐍𝐲 was someone they had met through Momo. Izuku and 𝐴𝐻𝐴𝐭 had been fans of her music, and when they heard Momo was close friends with her, they were eager to meet her. Kendo was also someone they had met through Momo. Back when 𝐴𝐻𝐴𝐭 had been trying to make as many hero friends as she could to bolster the company's sales and image. Kaminari was a friend of 𝐍𝐲, and therefore a friend of theirs. Toru was friends with Mina, Asui, Momo, and 𝐍𝐲, so again it was only natural they would become friends as well. ♯ was the only friend Izuku had actually sought out on his own. He wanted to help him get into the hero course, and thanks to Izuku's support gear, he did. Naturally, the two of them were very good friends, although ♯was a teacher at UN now on top of being a pro hero, so he was busy most of the time. Lastly, sitting as far away from Izuku as possible, was Mei. Izuku had insisted they invite her, as he considered her one of his friends. To her credit, she did clean herself up, but only because it's been a long-established rule that Mei was not allowed inside their house unless she was sufficiently clean. Alright, 𝐴𝐻𝐴𝐭 started the conversation. So now that everyone is here, where is it? Mei couldn't hold herself back anymore. I need to see it. What does it run on? How does it maintain such incredible structural integrity while maintaining such high mobility? How you can see the Gotham suit after we're done, Hatsumi. 𝐴𝐻𝐴𝐭 sighed while she rubbed her head. Mei seemed unsatisfied with that, but she decided to sit down and stay silent anyway. Last time she annoyed 𝐴𝐻𝐴𝐭 too much, she kicked her out the house, literally. Before we address the massive armored elephant in the room, can I just congratulate the two new parents here? Mina said, gesturing to Eri, making the horned girl shrink into her chair. Yeah, I knew you two would probably have kids at some point, but you go to skip the baby phase and go right into the cute kid phase. Toru squealed, and she is so cute. I suppose congratulations are in order, Momo said politely. I am very happy for the two of you, and I must agree with Toru, she is very adorable. Like Toru said, I thought you two might have kids, but I thought you'd have. Well, you know, Kirishima tried to find a way to explain it, without doing or saying anything inappropriate in front of Eri. Well, just because they adopted a kid doesn't mean they're not gonna have one the old-fashioned way, Kaminari pointed out. I mean, they have the money and we all know they're doing it on the act. 𝐍𝐲 stabbed Kaminari with one of her jacks. Not in front of the kid. Thank you, 𝐍𝐲, thank you all. Eri is a precious new addition to the family. She's a bit shy right now, so let's move on, shall we? 𝐴𝐻𝐴𝐭 said, taking the focus off of Eri. I think it's time we stopped dancing around the reason we're all here. Shoto turned directly to Izuku. What the hell are you thinking? Yes, as both your friend and as someone who has vested interest in your company, I have to address my concerns with Izuku going around committing what is basically vigilantism, and only not getting arrested because of a legal loophole, Momo explained. 𝐴𝐻𝐴𝐭 looked like she wanted to laugh. Come on, yeah, Momo. You know we'll be fine. Sure, the increase in security has caused a significant decrease in revenue, but we're still making more money than any of our competitors could dream of making. And as for Izuku's Iron Man thing, surprisingly enough, while many people have predictably gotten upset, there is an almost equal amount of people that are actually praising Izuku for taking responsibility for the harm 𝐴𝐻𝐴𝐭 has caused and trying to help. And even more, people just don't care. And even those people who are against Izuku's not vigilantism still buy our products. So in the end, any changes made to our sales because of Izuku are negligible. Well, I'm glad your sales aren't hurt, but Izuku definitely will get hurt if he keeps doing this, Kendo added. Yeah, we may make it look easy, but hero work requires a lot of training and hard work before you can even think about going onto the field, 𝐻𝐻𝐴𝐭 said. Didn't Class 1A gets attacked by an army of villains and defeat all of them in, like, the first few weeks of their training? 𝐴𝐻𝐴𝐭 asked, and we all almost died, Kaminari pointed out, because of that freaking Namu. A Namu which is a genetically designed villain. Not something you're likely to run into, especially because you destroyed all the Namus and killed their creator, 𝐴𝐻𝐴𝐭 reminded him. Izuku's fighting criminals on a level with the guys you fought at the USJ, except he's doing it in an invincible suit of armor that has enough firepower to blow up a city block. Wait, can he actually do that? Kirishima asked the question that interested many of the people present. Well, no, in one attack. Although the Uni-Beam would be capable of taking down several skyscraper-sized buildings in one attack, assuming the buildings are right next to each other and don't have any properties that would allow them to survive nuclear attacks. Although an attack of that scale would completely drain the suit of power and leave me a sitting duck. Does that count for both the primary power source and the backup power source, or just the primary power source? They asked. There is no secondary power source, Izuku said, surprising Mei. Adding a secondary power source would make the suit bulkier, causing it to become both less maneuverable and easier to hit. And due to the potency of the primary power source, adding a secondary power source just causes more problems than it solves. Okay, we're getting into crazy tech talk and kinda straying away from the topic. Mirio chimed in. No, Izuku, why don't you explain the suit's capabilities? 𝐻𝐴𝐽 told him. Well, the suit is powered by a classified piece of technology more potent than anything else available in the world, especially at its size, and is capable of powering the suit for a full 3 days provided that the suit doesn't make use of the repulsor beams, flight systems, or unibeam. Speaking of the flight system, the suit is capable of flying at around supersonic speeds. However, control over the suit at such high speeds would decrease drastically. While not flying, the suit is still capable of going at around 90 miles per hour at max speed, although it would still require about 2 minutes of running in order to reach max speed. As for offensive capabilities, the suit contains 2 wrists-mounted repulsor beams, which at full power could cause significant damage to Kirishima while he's not using his unbreakable form, and are greater in power than Ground Zero's app shot. 20 homing rockets which are capable of taking out any opponent possessing average durability instantaneously. A missile possessing the power of the average Ground Zero explosion. Shin flares that can cause minor burn damage to close opponents but are more meant to flash and cause temporary loss of sight. The suit also possesses enhanced strength, allowing the user to lift about 15 tons and punch with the force of 5 elephants, not accounting for any added force from acceleration. Lastly, the Unibeam is a weapon capable of, on average, dealing damage comparable to Ground Zero's most powerful blast, and at full power could even match the power of a single one of All Might's full power punches. Although it uses up a lot of power, durability-wise the armor as itself could take 1 or maybe 2 hits from Mirio before being completely destroyed. However, the person inside would likely take serious damage after 1 punch from Mirio, and the person inside the armor could only safely take 1 full power blast from Ground Zero before they start getting hurt themselves. It's immune to heat any level below the surface of the sun and is capable of functioning even through extreme cold. It's completely waterproof and has its own oxygen supply that could last for about a day, and is highly resistant to electricity as well as other elemental attacks. Lastly, the helmet contains a highly advanced HUD capable of showing the full status of the armor and giving access to all the scanners, including Izuku was talking at such intense speed that the only people who could understand him were 𝐻𝐴𝐽, Mirio, Nejiire, and Mei. Okay, stop, Mina shouted. It feels like my brain is going to explode. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, dude. I only got like half of that, Kaminari said. But we get the point. It's an extremely powerful suit, Shoto said. But that only begs the question, where are our super suits? Toru asked. Yes, I'm aware that you are halting the production of new products, but shouldn't you still allow custom orders of these armors to trustworthy heroes like you have in the past? Momo asked. Well, there is a big problem with the armor that keeps it from becoming purchasable anytime soon, 𝐻𝐴𝐽 explained. In order to properly operate the suit, you'd have to be a genius yourself. It would take years of training for even the most intelligent heroes, excluding Nezu, to learn how to safely pilot the armor. So Denki's not getting one anytime soon, Gyro commented with a smirk. Hey, Kaminari said, sounding offended. In time we could find a way to simplify the controls in the HUD, but that would take many years of development and testing, Izuku explained. Sorry, that aside, it doesn't matter how powerful your suit is. If you are inexperienced at power, you'll end up causing more harm than good, Asui said, making a very good point. Oh, I took that into account when I decided to do this, Izuku said. The armor informs me of any possible dangers my actions could pose to people or objects around me. Todoroki spoke up. Yes, but guys, I didn't bring you all here so you could try and talk Izuku out of this. 𝐻𝐴𝐽 interrupted. I tried that, and it didn't work. So what chance do you think the rest of you have? That actually caused them to quiet down. They were all well aware that 𝐻𝐴𝐽 was the one who wore the pants in their relationship. Izuku rarely ever objected to what she said, and it was even rarer that he ever won an argument with her. So if 𝐻𝐴𝐽 was adamantly against this, and Izuku was still doing it, it didn't bode well for their chances. Can I say something? Tamaki spoke up, much to the surprise of everyone else. Of course. What's on your mind, Tamaki? Mirio asked his friend. I was with him today. While he was fighting, he was pretty good. No innocents got hurt. No unnecessary property damage. He didn't even get hurt, Tamaki informed them. He's been doing this for a few weeks now, and nothing went wrong. I think he at least deserves a chance at least. Everyone stayed silent and took that in. The statement held a fair amount of truth. In the few weeks Izuku had operated, he performed with absolute efficiency and achieved complete victories. No civilians got injured. He himself never got injured. No villains ever escaped him, and while there was a little property damage, it was ultimately minor, and Izuku had paid for it all. All in all, it seemed like Tamaki had a point. I mean, we're not gonna convince him anyway, so I don't see any more point in arguing, 𝐲𝐻𝐬 said, finally taking a bit out of some of her food. Well, if there's nothing we can say to convince you, I guess 𝐲𝐻𝐬's right. No point in arguing. Mirio shook his head. But if your fancy scanners tell you that an enemy is too tough for you, then don't fight them. Call for help. For the most part, it seemed like many of them had accepted this, with a few exceptions. I still don't like this, Kiro, Tsuyu said. Neither do I, Momo added. Todoroki didn't say anything. He just sat there with his arms crossed looking very unsatisfied. Well, you're not gonna get anywhere moping about it, Ochako told them. Now come on, eat up. This meal cost more than most of you makes in a month, and more than Hatsumi will make ever. That's because you don't pay me, Hatsumi pointed out while digging into her meal. Your payment is still having access to our resources despite the fact you keep blowing things up, Ochako reminded her. And despite the fact that you make her hella jealous, Mina smirked. For the last time, I am not jealous. Ochako pouted, her face red with anger. Oh, boy, here we go again, Mirio said, with several others having similar thoughts. I have no reason to feel jealous. He's my husband, Ochako said, emphasizing that Izuku was hers. You really don't. Mei sighed. It took her a while to figure out that Ochako was jealous of her, and she still wasn't sure why. Apparently, it had something to do with all the times she'd taken Izuku's measurements. According to, well, most people, you weren't surpassed to touch a member of the opposite sex in their private areas, especially if they were married. God, she still remembered when Ochako had caught her in an intimate position with Izuku after they'd gotten married. She both sent her to the hospital and made her work to pay her hospital bills. That woman was ruthless. Right. Isn't that right, Iri, our daughter? Ochako turned to Iri. Iri seemed very uncomfortable, but was keeping herself together by scooting next to Izuku. Seeing this snapped Ochako out of her, totally not, jealous rage. Izuku, why don't you take Iri to bed? Ochako told him. Right, Izuku said. Also noticing Iri's silent distress, he picked her up and started walking out of the room. Sorry, I have to leave so soon. No, it's fine. Good night, Iri. Sorry for making you uncomfortable. Mirio apologized. Everyone else gave similar goodbyes as Izuku walked out of the room completely. Once they got far enough away, Izuku asked Iri something. Why didn't you tell me it was getting too much for you? I'm sorry. I didn't want to disappoint you, Iri said in a quiet voice. Iri, the fact that you came out and went to the dinner in the first place makes me very, very proud, Izuku told her. You've been so strong, so if you feel like it's too much for you, please tell us. We love you so much and we want you to be happy. Iri started crying from the amount of affection she was being given. She felt like she would never get used to all the love her parents gave her, and that she would never be worthy of it. Eventually, the two of them reached Iri's room. It was, as to be expected, extremely large. It was filled with toys, most of which were unplayed with, and a large, luxurious bed. And of course, the room was right next to Izuku and Ochako's. As Izuku laid Iri down in her bed, Iri asked him a question. Can you sleep with me tonight? Iri hated that she had to ask that. She still felt a little overwhelmed and shaken from the dinner, but she didn't want to inconvenience Izuku anymore. Of course, Iri. Izuku took off his shoes and some of his more uncomfortable overwear and laid down next to her. There were a few moments of silence. Iri asked him another question. Daddy, Iri asked him, why don't they want you to be a hero? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but mostly because it's not safe, Izuku told her. It was at this moment that Izuku realized that he never asked Iri what she thought of all this. Would she think that he's cool for taking down bad guys like 𝐸𝗉𝗄? Or would she want him to stop because she didn't want to risk losing him? Iri, what do you think? Do you want me to keep being Iron Man? Izuku asked her, somewhat fearful of the answer. If Iri told him she wanted him to stop, well, he'd never feel right putting on the armor. Iri stayed silent for a few moments before giving her answer. I don't want to lose Daddy, but 𝐸𝗉𝗄 was strong, really strong. I didn't think anyone could beat him. But you did. You're stronger than 𝐸𝗉𝗄. I think Daddy can beat anyone. Tears started washing down Izuku's cheeks as he held Iri closer to him. Thank you. Well, now he couldn't stop. No matter what, if his daughter thought he could beat anyone, then he'd just have to make sure to prove her right, and he would never give up. 𝐀𝐦 walked into her luxury apartment after a long day of serving as one of the top bodyguards of the Midori. She quickly slammed the door behind her and shut every lock in a quick but thorough manner. Afterward, she moved swiftly to her bedroom, slamming the door behind her again. 𝐀𝐦 went over to her vanity and pulled open one of the drawers and retrieved a phone. She dialed in a number and instantly someone picked up. Mask, said a deep voice on the other side. Sir, 𝐀𝐦 responded. I have news on the Izuku Midoriya situation. Go on, the voice told her. Midoriya's friends and wife have all failed at dissuading him from his actions. It appears he will continue his so-called Iron Man project for the foreseeable future, 𝐀𝐦 reported. I see. Damn that Chisaki. We were all profiting just fine off of Midoriya's technology, but he had to get greedy and inform him of our actions. growled the voice, before whoever it was quickly regained their composure. If Midoriya isn't going to listen to logic, then we'll just have to show him the dangers of playing hero. Whiplash should show him the flaws in his logic. You're going to kill him, sir? 𝐻𝐸 asked. Hopefully not. I only intend on having Whiplash scare him. His inventions are too useful. The person responded. However, should he persist in his foolishness, then we will have no choice but to end him. But what if Whiplash fails? 𝐻𝐸 asked. Whiplash has fought seasoned veteran heroes. Midoriya is simply a pretender in a powerful suit. He will not fail. The person responded. Speaking of which, why have you not acquired the designs for the Iron Man suit yet? I thought I told you that was of the utmost importance. I apologize, sir, but it's too heavily guarded. I only managed to get to the computer where the designs were held once, and I couldn't break the digital defenses. It would most likely require someone on Spy Master's level. 𝐻𝐸 explained. Then perhaps we should prioritize that rather than Midoriya. The person said. I wouldn't, sir. The Iron Man suit may not be as useful as you think. 𝐻𝐸 said. It requires someone with an extreme level of intelligence to operate it. Otherwise they would simply hurt themselves. I see. How disappointing. Still, I would like those designs. Our friends at Hammer may be able to make them more useful to us one day. The person said. 𝐻𝐸 scoffed. Doubtful. Regardless, I'm sending Whiplash to transport a shipment of Midoriya's technology. The person stated. I'll make sure it's easy to find. Yes, sir, 𝐻𝐸 said. If that is all, then I will leave you to your work. The person said. Do not disappoint me. Of course, sir, 𝐬𝐸 said. I will not fail you. 2 days later in Izuku's home lab. All right, sorry about the wait. Here's your armor. Izuku handed Mirio a suitcase. Thanks. Just in time, too. Mirio smiled brightly as usual while taking the suitcase. I still can't thank you enough for these. Oh, you shouldn't thank me too much. Like I said, Melissa pioneered the technology. I just made some adjustments, Izuku told him. Anyway, while you're in America, try not to go over 100%. I know you like to plus ultra and everything, but me and May are here and Melissa's on my island, so no one will be there to repair your gear if it gets broken. I make no promises, Mirio teased, only half joking. And try not to get into any trouble while I'm gone. I make no promises. Izuku awkwardly laughed as he returned the half joke. ERRRR, ERRRR, ERRRR. Unauthorized shipment of technology detected. The alarm on Izuku's computer sounded. Deploy armor, Izuku said almost instantly as a cylinder in his lab opened up revealing his armor. Hey, I could go with you if you want. I'm sure we could wrap this up before my flight leaves. Mirio offered. No, I've got this. If you miss another flight because of something like this, your PR agent might actually kill you, Izuku told him. Mirio cringed at the thought. Yeah, you're probably right. Still remember, if you need help you can always call Tamaki and 𝐻𝐸. Don't get in too over your head. I'll be fine, Izuku reassured him. Now go. Mirio nodded, before running out the door at super speed, kicking up winds behind him, leaving Izuku alone with the armor. All right, time to go. Izuku steeled himself for battle. 7 minutes later, after a couple minutes flying at top speed, Izuku slowed down when he reached the signal that his stolen tech was emitting. At a warehouse near the harbor. Looks like the technology is being stored inside that truck, Izuku noted. He landed down behind the truck and scanned it. Scanning. One heat signature detected. Izuku looked at his scanners and realized that not only was his tech inside the truck, but so was someone else. And that was all Izuku could deduce before suddenly an energized whip wrapped around his helmet. Wah! The whip threw Izuku around, cutting through the side of the truck and tossing Izuku to the side. Crash. Izuku grunted as he crashed through the concrete wall and into the warehouse. Oh, Izuku pulled himself up slowly and noticed that someone was walking in through the hole Izuku made. He looked up and saw the villain in question. They were intimidatingly tall and had red hair, but that was all Izuku could see past the armor he was wearing. Armor made his stolen tech. He had 2 whips by his side, crackling with blue energy. That doesn't belong to you, Izuku growled as he got up and shot 2 repulsor blasts from his palms at the villain. The villain moved his whips, swatting the 2 blasts into nothing, and striking Izuku in the chest. AHHH. Izuku was sent flying back a few feet, but before he could hit the ground he activated his repulsors and stopped himself in the air. Izuku distanced himself from the villain, flying as far up as he could in the enclosed space they were in. He swatted away my repulsor blast. Even at that level of power, the reaction time and precision needed for that is insane. Izuku noticed the dent in his armor from where the villain hit him. He even dented my armor. Scan villain data banks, Izuku told his armor. I have to know who this is. What I'm working with. Villain recognized. A rank villain, Whiplash. Quirk Energize. Allows the user to cover objects in blue energy, increasing their power and making them deadly weapons. However, this normally causes those objects to degrade in durability and fall apart. The armor read off the villain's file. Any loss of durability in the whips? Izuku asked the armor, hoping he found a weakness. None. The armor quickly dashed Izuku's hopes. They must have used my tech to make whips that move the energy around within them. This would keep them from degrading. Izuku grit his teeth with frustration. If I just use more repulsor blast, he'll block them. Let's see what happens when you try to whip this. Izuku raised his arm and a missile rose up from the armor, ready to fire once Izuku's targeting system locked onto the villain. Before Izuku's targeting system could finish, however, Whiplash swung his whip at Izuku, forcing him to dodge as the whip just missed his arm. But that wasn't all. Whiplash maneuvered the whip, causing the tip to suddenly veer to the left and just barely hit the missile. Kaboom! AGGHHH! Izuku shouted as he was knocked out of the air by his own explosion and smashed against the wall of the building once more. The armored hero groaned as he groggily pulled himself out of a wall. The explosion going off so close to his head left him stunned and momentarily out of it. But a moment was all Whiplash needed, as he flung his whips at Izuku. AHHH! Izuku cried as the wipes hit his back, causing visible damage to his armor. Whiplash didn't let up, attacking Izuku again and again in multiple places. His arms, his back, his legs, all were slashed by the energized whip as Izuku took more and more damage. Armor integrity at 63%, the armor announced. Right arm repulsor unoperational. The latest attack hit Izuku in the helmet. The pain shocked Izuku out of his stunned state and acted fast. Deploy flares. The armor's shins opened up, and flares flew out of them at Whiplash while emitting a bright, blinding light. Whiplash flipped backward into the side, jumping out of the way of the attack, but the explosion from the flares filled the building with light. Fortunately, Izuku's helmet filtered out the light. This is my chance, Izuku thought. Increase repulsor power to 50%. Izuku shouted as he aimed his repulsor at Whiplash. Unfortunately, while Whiplash couldn't see anything, he could hear Izuku shouting that he was about to attack at the top of his lungs. Whiplash swatted the blast out of the air and attacked Izuku once more, the whip hitting the armor's side and sending him flying once more. Izuku grabbed the ground as he was hurling through the air, slowing him down and eventually stopping him as he landed on his knee. Okay, I probably shouldn't have shouted that, Izuku thought. Ranged attacks won't do me any good. If I want to win, I'm going to need to use my strength and speed, and also some tricks. Fire shoulder missiles, Izuku whispered this time as he got up on both his feet. Don't target, just fire in his direction. The armor's shoulders rose up and missiles fired out at Whiplash. The villain cracked his whip and swiped at all the missiles, causing them to explode and make a smokescreen in front of him. Suddenly, Izuku rocketed out from the smoke, flying at high speed right toward Whiplash. Whiplash barely had any time to react, as he ducked back to avoid the attack, barely managing to do so as Izuku was so close. Their masks touched, creating a screeching sound as Izuku flew past his target. Crash! After missing his target, Izuku flew straight through the warehouse wall. He managed to stop himself midair before he could go too far past his opponent, but before he could turn around, Whiplash's whip wrapped around Izuku's waist and arms and pulled him back inside. Gah! Izuku was once again forced to the floor of the warehouse. How much is the armor's durability? Izuku asked as he pulled himself back to his feet. 51%, the armor reported. I have to end his fast. If I could just punch him once or twice, then that would end it. Izuku thought up a plan. I can't keep flying. I have to stand my ground, otherwise he's gonna keep knocking me around. I'll just have to rely on my leftover durability, my strength, and my speed. Izuku ran at Whiplash, and the villain retaliated by attacking him with his whips. Izuku tanked the blows, opting to let them hit him if he could get closer to his foe. Thankfully, it only took a couple seconds to close the distance and get into punching range. Izuku threw a punch at Whiplash, who crouched down to avoid it, and whipped Izuku's side. Gah! Izuku grit his teeth and raised his fist, before bringing it down to the villain, who flipped backward to avoid it and whipped Izuku twice in the face. Izuku was stunned momentarily from the hits, and Whiplash took this opportunity to strike at Izuku some more, hitting him with attack after attack from his whips. Armor and integrity at 24%. His armor started to malfunction as it took more damage. Desperate, Izuku asked, how much power do we have? 79%. The armor announced. Fire uni beam. Izuku shouted. His arc reactor powered up with a strong hum, and Whiplash stopped his attacks as he realized that whatever was about to happen next would be dangerous for him. A large beam of energy fired out of the arc reactor, heading right towards Whiplash. The villain barely managed to jump out of the way, getting his armor singed in the process. Izuku turned to hit Whiplash, but the villain kept dodging and running away. The uni beam cuts through everything in its way: boxes, crates, the building itself, its support beams. Change the left repulsor from blast to beam. Izuku was going all out. He aimed his repulsor beam in front of Whiplash, cutting him off while the uni beam was catching up. Power down to 30%. His armor warned. Doesn't matter how low my power is if he cuts through my armor. Izuku grunted as he kept trying to hit Whiplash. Whiplash cracked his whip up at one of the platforms above him and narrowly avoided the 2 beams. He pulled himself onto the platform, before using his whips to destroy 2 more support columns, before leaping out a nearby window. Suddenly, the building began to rumble, and cracks appeared in the walls. Building collapse imminent. His armor warned. Izuku's eyes widened as the building started to come down around him. He fell backward and shouted, "Unibeam, full power." The ceiling started to fall apart, but before it could come crashing down onto Izuku, his Unibeam suddenly exploded in power and size, destroying most of the ceiling above and around him. After about 5 seconds, Izuku's armor shut down. He had run out of power. The rest of the building came down around him, but none fell on him, leaving him a circle surrounded by debris. "I can't move. No, not like this." Izuku tried his best, but without any power, his armor would not move. He heard footsteps approach his helpless form, and soon he could see Whiplash walk up to him, staring down at him. The villain kneeled down to him and simply said, "You're no hero." And with that, Whiplash stood up and ran away, fleeing the scene. Many emotions filled Izuku in that moment. Relief that he was apparently still going to live. Rage at the fact that the villain would now get to run free, still using his tech. But most of all, despair at his crushing and absolute loss. You couldn't have waited for backup. As Izuku suspected, Ochako didn't wait long before scolding him, having only just gotten home from the hospital. After his loss, Tamaki found him in the rubble and brought him to the hospital. And after a few hours of treatment he was released. Now he was in his lab, with a very upset Ochako. "I didn't think that a class villain would show up," Izuku explained while he typed on his computer. "Most of the villains I've fought before don't even have rank, let alone one that high." "Izuku, our tech is the most advanced tech in the world," Ochako stated the obvious. Naturally, every villain from the highest rank to the no-names would want to get their hands on it for one reason or another. It was only a matter of time until the guys at the higher level got tired of you taking down their goons and making their lives harder. Izuku paused. "I guess. I just didn't think they would go from no-names to a rank." "I mean, it's pretty effective," Ochako said. "If they wanted to beat you before you could become more experienced or upgrade your armor." "But then why would he let me live?" Izuku asked. "Because you're more useful alive," Ochako theorized. "My guess, and Chisholm's, is that they intended to scare you out of being Iron Man, and hoped that you would eventually take the company out of lockdown and make new tech for them to steal." Izuku scowled. "Well, that's not happening." Ochako sighed. In truth, she kind of hoped this experience would stop Izuku from continuing his crusade. But deep down she knew it wouldn't be that easy. "You could have died, Izuku." Izuku stopped what he was doing for a moment, and turned his chair to face Ochako. "That was because I made some mistakes. If I just performed better, then I'm sure I would have beat him." Izuku turned back towards his computer. "Which is why I'm reviewing the armor's feed to see what mistakes I made, so the next time we fight, I'll win." Izuku and Ochako watched the battle from Izuku's armor, while Izuku scribbled down things in his notebook. "You're not gonna beat him with just notes." Izuku and Ochako looked at the doorway and saw 𝐀𝐦 leaning in the doorframe. "𝐀𝐦, how long have you been standing there?" Izuku asked. "Long enough to know you're in over your head." 𝐀𝐦 walked closer to them and looked at Whiplash. "This guy's not just a villain. He's a professional villain. Experienced, maybe even. No, definitely trained. You're not going to be able to beat him just by not making the same mistakes. And even then, I'm not convinced you won't make the same mistakes. You're too inexperienced, untrained. The gap between you and him in skill is too wide." Izuku looked back at the footage for a few moments. "You may be right. So what are you going to do?" Ochako asked him. "We could get you a trainer." "That takes too long," Izuku stated firmly. "In that time, who knows how many people could be getting hurt by my tech." "My tech? He's using my tech." "Yes, we get it, Izuku. They must be stopped." Ochako sighed. No, that's not what I meant," Izuku said. "He's using my tech, so I should be able to use that against him." "You mean with the disc?" Ochako asked. "No, if I tried to use the disc on the whips, assuming he didn't just hit them out of the air, they would be instantly destroyed by the energy pulsing through them," Izuku explained. "What I mean is, what if I build an armor to counter his whips? And what if he has more than just the whips?" 𝐀𝐦 asked. "You of all people should know that anyone worth their salt will have more than one trick up their sleeve." Izuku nodded, thinking deeply about what 𝐀𝐦 said. "I'll have to take that into consideration while building the armor. I'll analyze his quirk and see what other applications I can think of and how to counter them." "Thank you, 𝐀𝐦. I would really recommend combat training." "I think you're underestimating its benefits," 𝐀𝐦 warned him. "I'm not. I'm just not underestimating how much time it will take," Izuku said, returning his focus to his work. 𝐀𝐦 and Ochako gave each other worried looks. Both of them had a very, very bad feeling about this. A week later, Izuku looked at his newly finished armor, looking between it and his blueprints to check for discrepancies. This new armor was different from his old one. It was pure black, except for the white vein-like lines that ran along the entire armor, all connecting to the arc reactor. The chest plate also was a bit bulkier, but not too much so, and the rest of the armor was about the same size. Okay, everything looks good, Izuku said while looking it over. Everything's good, Eri, who had once again acted as his personal lab assistant, asked. It seems so, Izuku told her. After a bit more looking, he stopped when he reached the helmet, noticing something. He picked up the helmet, taking it off the rest of the armor and getting a closer look at it. This plate is sticking out. That means there's a wire sticking up, and that could mean one of the wires is uneven and could snap. And from what it looks like, that could mess up the targeting system. Eri, hand me my wiring tools and drawer 2 degrees Celsius. Eri nodded and moved over the drawers, locating drawer 2 degrees Celsius, opening it, and taking out some tools, before quickly delivering them to Izuku. Izuku took the tools and sat down, before adjusting the helmet. Eri went beside him. Izuku stopped for a second to help up onto a stool next to him, and watched him work intently. After a few moments, Eri spoke up. Are you gonna beat that scary whip man? Izuku paused. Yes, Eri, I'm altering my armor to make it easier to beat him. How? Eri asked. Well, Whiplash's whips are only dangerous to me because of the energy flowing through them. When the whips hit or slash me, the energy burns through the armor, Izuku explained. Izuku pointed at the white lines on his armor. Do you see these? Eri nodded. These will absorb the energy from the whips and redirect them to this special arc reactor, Izuku explained. So anytime he hits me with the whip, it doesn't hurt me, it makes me stronger. So you steal his energy, like a parasitic, Eri asked. You mean a parasite? Izuku corrected, receiving a nod from Eri. Yes, I guess it is like a parasite. Where did you learn that? Mommy taught me. She kept yelling about parasites trying to steal her happiness and that she was going to do very bad things to them, Eri explained. She also said humans can be parasites too, like Ground Zero fans. Izuku face-palmed. Looks like I'm going to have a talk with Mommy about what is and what is not appropriate to teach you. Eri gave another look at the armor. Is this gonna be your new armor? Not permanently. Izuku shook his head. This armor was made to fight against people who rely on energy attacks. It doesn't have many non-energy based attacks because I had to make room for the absorption system. And the armor is not very energy efficient. That means it runs out of power quickly, Eri pointed out. Yes, it does. Very good. Izuku patted her on the head. I probably won't use the armor again after I beat Whiplash, although it should be useful to keep around, just in case. BERRR. Whiplash energy signature detected. Izuku had altered the search and alert system to look for Whiplash's energy signature. Basically, if Whiplash used his quirk, he could track him. This hadn't been the first time Whiplash popped up in the last week, but now Izuku could finally do something about it. Time to go. Izuku finished up the modifications on his helmet, running back to the armor and reattaching it. Add to the suit-up machine, set to prime. The armor sunk into the wall, which closed up as the armor was transferred. Izuku walked over to the circle in the center of his lab, waiting for his armor to be placed on his body. Are you going to fight that strong villain? Eri asked. Yes, Eri, I am, Izuku answered, as the circle lit up and the suit-up process began. Be careful, Eri warned, and good luck. Izuku smiled. As the machine finished placing the armor on Izuku's body, it powered up and he was ready to go. Thanks, Eri. I will. FWOOSH. Sometime later, the current location of Whiplash put him deep in the forest, most likely at another warehouse, because if there was one thing villains loved, it was warehouses. Izuku flew above the trees. He really couldn't see anything below him. But that was okay, because he had all of his scanners and radar on, so there was no way something could take him by surprise. Kaboom! And then suddenly a large rocket flew out of the trees and blasted Izuku. GAH! Izuku cried as the rocket hit him dead on, knocking him higher into the air. Boom, 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 boom. More rockets, capitalizing on Izuku's stunned state, pelted his armor with explosions, knocking him higher and higher into the air through clouds of smoke. Eventually, Izuku managed to get his head back in the game and dodged to the left. Armor integrity at 91%. His armor announced. Well, at least they aren't doing much damage, Izuku thought as he dodged more rocket barrages. Izuku flew through the sky dodging rockets left and right while trying to scan the location of whatever the source of this attack was. What's going on? I can't get a lock on its source. GAH. Izuku got distracted and was hit in the face with another rocket. What's going on? Why can't I detect anything? Izuku thought about it for a moment before he realized something. They have my tech. They're using my anti-radar tech. Of course, I can't track them. Okay, what do I do? These are most likely coming out of turrets because I'm not getting any heat signatures or any other signs of humans firing these. I could wait until they run out of rockets, but that might not be good for my battery. Wait a minute. Izuku thought of a solution. Armor, track where these rockets are coming from. take into account homing properties, wind properties, and my location in relation to their place of origin, 𝐬𝐸 ordered. His armor obeyed his command, scanning the rockets and where they were being fired at, tracking down the source while 𝐬𝐸 dodged more rocket fire. Sources located, adjusting HUD. His armor finished after half a minute. Red dots appeared on 𝐬𝐸's map, allowing 𝐬𝐸 to finally see where the attacks were coming from. 𝐬𝐸 flew straight down, landing right behind a big rock. I can't afford to fly down here. Too many trees. I'll bump into everything. I have to be careful. 𝐬𝐸 looked at the red dots on his map. 10 turrets. I can do this. 𝐬𝐸 stepped out from behind the rock and ran through the forest. He approached the first turret in seconds, and as soon as 𝐬𝐸 got close, the turret turned to him and began to fire. No longer having the air advantage, 𝐬𝐸 struggled to dodge, moving left and right as fast as he could, causing him to trip. Fortunately, before the turret could take advantage of this, however, 𝐬𝐸 managed to shoot a repulsor blast at the turret, causing it to explode. 𝐬𝐸 breathed a sigh of relief. 1 down, 9 to kaboom. Darn it, 𝐬𝐸 shouted as he was blown away by another rocket. He had been so focused on that one turret that he didn't notice he entered the range of 2 others. 𝐬𝐸 rolled out of the way of the rest of the rockets, eventually pulling himself up and running through the forest dodging rockets. Thanks to his speed, 𝐬𝐸 was able to avoid the rockets pretty well. The trees, however, despite being completely still, somehow proved to be harder to dodge. 𝐬𝐸 crashed through another tree after dodging a rocket, before crashing through another tree. Eventually, 𝐬𝐸 got close to one of the turrets and blasted it with a repulsor blast, destroying it. 𝐬𝐸 jumped out of the way of more rockets, before unleashing another repulsor blast and destroying that turret too. At this rate, I'll run out of power trying to destroy all these things, 𝐬𝐸 thought. Switch to beam. 𝐬𝐸 held up his palm in the direction of the nearest turret, which he couldn't see due to the trees, but thanks to his map he did know its location. 𝐸𝐸 blasted a repulsor beam that cut through the trees until it reached the turret. Boom! The sound of the explosion signaled the destruction of the turret, leaving 𝐬𝐸 to blast a few more. 𝐸𝐸 𝐬𝐸 let out beam after beam, making holes in, if not just straight knocking down trees, as he blew up turrets in every direction until finally they were all destroyed. The armored genius let out a small sigh of relief. What is the level of armor integrity? He asked. Armor integrity at 82%. The armor reported. In my power? 𝐬𝐸 asked. Power at 57%. The armor answered. 𝐬𝐸 grit his teeth. This armor's efficiency is really bad. I better find 𝗵lash soon before threat detected. Behind you. The armor warned. Crack. 𝐬𝐸 felt a small impact on his armor, but it didn't even budge him. Power absorbed. Power at 64%. The armor told him. 𝗵lash. 𝐬𝐸 turned around, and of course, standing there was the enemy he had been looking for. So that's what you came up with, 𝗵lash said, looking at his whips. 𝐬𝐸 wasted no time and ran right at the villain. Knowing that the whips could no longer harm him, but could still swat his repulsor blast out of the air, so he had to take a direct approach. 𝗵lash dodged a punch given by 𝐬𝐸, the armored man's fist plunging into the cliffside and cracking the rock. 𝐬𝐸 took his fist out of the cliff and kept charging at 𝗵lash, letting out a flurry of blows at 𝗵lash that the villain promptly dodged. Same as before, his punches are sloppy, unfocuses, predictable, but damn strong and fast. Without my whips, I can't keep him at a distance or even hurt him. His punches are too fast for me to dodge for too long. Eventually, he will hit me and I will go down. 𝗵lash thought about how to best solve this issue. 𝗵lash deactivated his quirk, turning his whips into normal metal whips, before he shot out one of his whips at a nearby tree branch and pulled himself towards it. The villain landed on top of the tree branch and then jumped away through the treetops. Is he trying to escape? 𝐬𝐸 ran after the villain, knowing darn well that he had no chance of jumping from branch to branch like he did. Instead, 𝐬𝐸 fired a repulsor blast at the trees 𝗵lash was jumping on, but the villain was simply too skilled. Every time 𝐬𝐸 blasted down a tree, 𝗵lash had already moved onto another tree. His movements were sporadic and unpredictable, and using his whips, and could swing onto trees that were much farther than he could jump. Soon enough, 𝐬𝐸 had lost track of him in the dense woods. 𝐬𝐸 tried to use his scanners to track him, but nothing was showing in results. He must also be using my stealth tech. 𝐬𝐸 couldn't put into words how infuriating it was to have his own tech used against him like this. It made his blood boil and his desire to beat 𝗵lash increased exponentially. Suddenly, 𝐬𝐸 heard a branch snap in half and fall to the floor. 𝐬𝐸 reacted and blasted the spot where he heard the noise. However, nothing was there. He heard another rustling in leaves, and blasted that area only to hit nothing. It keeps hopping from tree to tree. I need to get rid of these stupid trees, 𝐬𝐸 thought. Blast a beam. 𝐬𝐸 brought his hands out to the sides, before firing the repulsor beams. The beams cut through all the trees in their way. Izuku then spun around in the circle. Hundreds of thuds were heard as trees fell all around the forest, clearing a large area around him so he could finally see. Note to self, have people replant the trees in this area, Izuku thought, feeling a bit guilty for the massive destruction of nature. Thwack. Izuku was suddenly swept off his feet by a tree trunk hitting him in the back. He still found a way to sneak attack me. Izuku was about to pull himself up and throw the tree trunk off of him when 2 more tree trunks fell on top of him. Whiplash used his whips to pick up the fallen trees and throw them on top of Izuku. Soon enough, Izuku was covered in a stack of fallen trees, buried under a mountain of wood. Once Izuku was completely entombed, Whiplash stopped and waited for Izuku to escape. Then, a blue glow started to emanate from the pile, leaking through the openings between the branches until BRRRRRRRRRRR. The shining beacon of light that was the uni beam burst through the center of the stack, causing some of the trees to roll or even fly off. The beam dissipated, and the stack started to rumble and move. RAHHH. Izuku burst up into the sky using his thrusters, finally free of trees. He looked down at Whiplash. He really wanted to attack him right now. However, there were some things he had to check. Status update. Izuku told his armor. Armor integrity at 78%. Power at 36%. The armor reported, "Damn it, at this rate, I'll run out of power again." Izuku grit his teeth in anger. His armored fist clenched as he glared at Whiplash intensely. He wanted to beat him. It took every bit of restraint he had not to attack him where he stood. But he thought of 𝐻𝐡𝐚𝐭 𝐖𝐟, how they would react to his death, and it held him back. If he continued to fight Whiplash, there was a large chance he would run out of power, leaving him a sitting duck. And if Whiplash wasn't as merciful as last time, it would be the end of him. In the end, he had to retreat. And so with a heavy heart, he turned the other way and flew at max speed away from Whiplash, leaving the villain behind in seconds. Another loss, not as crushing or terrifying as the one before it, but a loss nonetheless.